Meeting will be led by Superintendent Jorge Aguilar.
You. Ready? Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty under God. Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Superintendent Aguilar. Item 4.2, the broadcast statement, which will be read by our student board member.
This meeting of the Sacramento City School Board is being recorded in its entirety and will be cablecast on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast, Consolidated Communications, and AT&T Uverse. Today's meeting will air Sunday, September 19th at 7 p.m. and Monday, September 21st at noon, and also webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. The public has been given the opportunity to address the board through public comment, either by submitting comments, which are posted on our website, or by speaking during the meeting. Members of the public were also provided the opportunity to speak to the board during the meeting. Members of the public who wish to speak during the meeting submitted a speaker form by noon today and were sent a link to participate. When it is your turn to provide comment, we will call on you to provide comment orally. Your video will not be on. Please always limit comments during public comment to items that are not on the agenda. If you do comment on an item that is on the agenda, we will ask that you please defer your comments until your item comes up on the agenda.
Thank you so much. Item 4.3, our stellar student. This evening's stellar student is Eva Ketchum from West Campus High School. Member Minnick, will you be introducing Eva?
Absolutely. Thank you, President Ryan. All right. So I'm very excited to present this tonight. So Eva Ketchum is a student who is Sac City strong, as evidenced by her attendance in Sac City schools from kindergarten till 12th grade. Currently, Eva's a proud member of the West Campus class of 2021. Prior to COVID-19, she represented the Mighty Warriors on the varsity soccer team as a top student athlete. During the off season, Eva spends time honing her skills as a writer and a singer-songwriter. Although she's interested in attending UC Santa Barbara, she is looking forward to applying to a host of UCs that have a strong sociology program. This summer, she was a student at the Summer at City Hall program, and Eva's a hard worker, a great collaborator, and supported her peers with kindness and empathy throughout a really difficult topic for her team's project, Teen Mental Health Awareness. So I am excited tonight to present our stellar student, Eva Ketchum.
Hello, my name is Eva Ketchum. It is an honor to be here this evening recognized by SUSD and the City of Sacramento's Youth Summer Program, Summer at City Hall. Over the course of 5 weeks in June and July, I took part in daily workshops and classes led by teachers and youth parks and community enrichment personnel. These workshops culminated in a presentation to the City Council of a solution to a local problem us youth had observed. My teammates and I chose to tackle the very personal issue of mental health and the lack of resource awareness among Sacramento youth. Thanks to City Council, the Summer at City Hall program, and local school districts, including Sac City Unified, Sacramento students will now have an easily accessible toolkit with which they can receive the support they need. I would like to thank our teachers, senior liaisons, and program coordinators who made this wonderful opportunity possible, even during a serious pandemic. I would also like to thank my group mates and Team Zodiac, who worked resolutely alongside me to make a difference in our community. Summer at City Hall gives youth a seat at the table, a chance to voice our concerns on a prevalent issue and be heard. This program gave me an irreplaceable experience, allowing me to develop lifelong skills in public speaking, teamwork, and civic engagement. Thank you to everyone who made this opportunity possible.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
If this were a healthier time, I would be holding a certificate with you there at the district office and taking a picture, but I'll have to leave it at that. But great job, and thank you for going into great detail about the amazing stuff that happens at Summer at City Hall. Thanks, President Ryan.
President Ryan, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you again, Eva. We loved your words of wisdom and that this was such a meaningful experience for you. Item 5.0, announcement of action taken in closed session.
Yes, Madam President. One action to announce out of closed session is a special education agreement. It was approved by the board by 6 affirmative votes with board member Wu absent. That concludes the announcements out of closed session, Madam President.
Thank you, Jerry. Item 6.0, agenda adoption. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Preferential vote?
Aye.
All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Item 7.0, special presentation. This evening, we have 2 presentations on very timely topics. The first is resolution number 3166, Attendance Awareness Month, which will be presented by 2 wonderful staff members led by Jennifer Kreshman and our youth media team.
Hello, how is everyone? So I have 2 wonderful youth media team members here tonight who are actually going to read the Attendance Awareness Month resolution. So I'd like to welcome them. I can't see them on my screen, but they can go ahead and begin to read the resolution as they have it all split up.
Good evening. My name is Estrella Ortega. As stated previously, I am a student participating in the Source Media Agency. I'm a senior at West Campus High School. I'm a fellow student with Eva. And Christian Pillay was also a sophomore at our school. The attendance policy states that due to COVID-19, our current attendance practices and policies need to be adjusted for the 2020 to 2021 school year. Our office's primary focus will be on students' well-being and overall engagement in school. Attendance, participation, and emotional connectedness to school will be counted as student engagement, whether it be in person, or virtually through distance learning. Below are past and current attendance policies related to education code. Please check the district website or with the school site for updates about attendance, truancy, and student engagement for this upcoming school year. SUSD has implemented an attendance improvement program to reduce chronic absence, increase school attendance, and support students and families in attending school regularly. For more information, please contact the Be Here Attendance Office at 916-643-2119. Chronic absence. Students are determined to be chronically absent when they miss 10% or more of school days for any reason, including excused absences, unexcused absences, or suspensions. Excused absences. A student's absence shall be excused for the following reasons, indicated in Education Code 48205. Personal illness. Quarantine under the direction of the county or city health officer, medical, dental, optometric, and chiropractic appointments, as well as the parent must provide a doctor's note or appointment slip. Attendance at funeral services for a member of the immediate family, which is defined as the mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, spouse, son or son-in-law, daughter or daughter-in-law, brother or sister, or any relative living in the student's immediate household. Education Code 45194 and 48205. Jury duty in the manner provided by law.
Illness or medical appointment during school hours of a child of whom the pupil is the custodial parent. Participation in religious instruction or exercises in accordance with district policy as indicated in Education Code 46014. In such instances, the student shall attend at least the minimum school day. The student shall be excused for this purpose on no more than 4 school days per month. For the purpose of serving as a member of the precinct board for an education pursuant to Elections Code Section 12302, Education Code 48205. For the purpose of spending time with a member of the pupil's immediate family who is an active duty member of the Unified Services as defined in Section 49701, and has been called to duty for, is on leave from, or has immediately returned from the deployment to a combat zone or combat support position. Absences granted pursuant to the paragraph shall be granted for a period of time to be determined at the discretion of the superintendent of the school district. For the purpose of attending the pupil's naturalization ceremony to become a United States citizen. A pupil absent from school under Section EC 48205 shall be allowed to complete all assignments and tests missed during the absence that can be reasonably provided, and upon satisfactory completion within a reasonable period of time shall be given full credit. The teacher of the class from which a pupil is absent shall determine which tests and assignments shall be reasonably equivalent to, but not necessarily identical to, the tests and assignments that the pupil missed during the absence. In addition, a student's absence shall be excused for justifiable personal reasons. Advance written by the parent/guardian and approval of the principal or designee shall be required for absences. Appearance in court, attendance at funeral services, observation of a holiday or ceremony of his or her religion, attendance at religious retreats for no more than 4 hours during a semester, and employment interview or conference. Lastly, if a student is the custodial parent of a child, his or her absence shall be excused when the child is ill or has a medical appointment during school hours. For the verification of student absences, when students who have been absent return to school, they must present a satisfactory explanation verifying the reason for the absence. The following methods may be used to verify student absences. Written note from parent/guardian, parent representative, or student if they are 18 years or older. This is not applicable to tardies or truant tardies. Education Code 46012. Conversation in person or by telephone between the verifying employee of the student's parent/guardian or parent representative. District personnel staff shall record the following: name of student, name of parent, guardian representative, name of verifying employee, date or dates of absence, and reasons for absence.
As well as visit to the student's home by verifying employee or any other reasonable method which establishes the fact that the student was absent for the reason stated. A written recording shall be made, including information outlined above. Physician's verification. When excusing students for confidential medical services or verifying such appointments, district staff shall not ask the purpose of such appointment, but may contact the medical office to confirm the time of the appointment. When a student had 10 absences in the school year for illnesses verified by the methods listed in numbers 1, 2, and 3 above, any further absences for illness must be verified by the physician. That is the end of the attendance policy.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. That was a lot of words and reading of the attendance policy. I'm going to give a quick recap of the resolution for this year. I'm going to give you some specific directives that we'll be doing. So specifically, we will make clear that improving student attendance, including taking daily attendance and participation, and monitoring absenteeism continues to be a top priority. So that's even in this distance learning world. Secondly, we will ensure that all students' participation and engagement in learning opportunities, both synchronous and asynchronous, are equitable, and that schools are held accountable by certifying and monitoring the state-mandated weekly engagement record. Third, we will use an expanded set of data, including chronic absence, digital access, access information, relationships, and participation to monitor outcomes for different populations of students, raise the public awareness, establish goals, allocate resources, and track progress. And that way we can assure accountability for an equal opportunity to learn. 4, we will engage students, families, educators, and the broader community, including civic and elected leaders, local businesses, clergy members, and nonprofit organizations in identifying barriers to getting to school. So whether that means getting to school via transportation or getting to school online. So hotspots, connectivity, devices. We will develop meaningful solutions that ensure all children and youth keep learning despite the challenges of COVID-19. We will also ensure access to learning by promoting universal access to the internet, computer devices to all students and all school staff. We will hold schools and/or districts harmless for funding decisions based on attendance and enrollment data for the 2020 to 2021 school year. And last, We will provide tiered re-engagement strategies and interventions to re-engage students and families who participate less than 40% or miss more than 3 days in any given school week. So we all know that attendance is the foundation for a student's education, right? They have to be there either physically or virtually in order to receive an education. In distance learning, attendance has grown into a larger concept of participation and engagement. How are our students engaging and acting in class, right? Now that we don't have the opportunity to see our students in person every day, we must ensure that they are safe, connected, doing the work, and engaged in the learning process. The state has made it mandatory that we not only track and monitor when a student is present, but also their level of participation. When a student is not participating daily, we have created a system of outreach and support to get back to them to get them back on track. Our focus, not only during this month of September, which is Attendance Awareness Month, but all year, will be to keep our students connected no matter what is happening in the world around them. So I really want to thank Estrella and Christian. You did a wonderful job reading that. They've done a wonderful job promoting videos and helping to keep students engaged this year. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was an honor to speak here.
Thank you.
President Ryan, you're muted.
Do we have any public comments on this item?
Yes, we do, Board President Ryan. We have one from Allison French Tubo. Keeping students participating engaged is so important, and I appreciate the efforts made by staff in that work and in this presentation. I want to call out the section stating trauma-informed approaches rather than responding with punitive action as very important. The district's baseline approach has been to send letters that used to be threatening and then changed to offering information about attendance impacts, but has yet to be regularly and systemically using that correspondence to ask families what they think is keeping their child from attending school. Families know their children best. SEUSD should be partnering with them on this simplest level to get their insights. That was it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So at this time, we're going to take board member comments quickly if anyone has on this resolution. I did want to, Jennifer, thank you and ask if you can reinforce for us one piece that you talked about in terms of the virtual environment that we're living in, which is the connectivity piece as being crucial to attendance. I know that there have been some varying levels of understanding, both about the availability of the 6 months of Comcast internet and the availability of the hotspots for families who need greater bandwidth to be able to accommodate multiple siblings' participation in Zooms at once. Can we just close out this item with having you just do a quick update and direction for information for families who might be listening and in need?
Yes, absolutely. So first and foremost, I will give you the number of our office, which is the Attendance and Engagement Office. It's 916-643-2121. And so we will help you with anything regarding connectivity, attendance, about anything regarding school as a whole. Just give us a call. We are here to help. So around hotspot, we have a limited number of hotspots, but are ordering a large number more that should arrive next week. So we have students that have multiple students sharing a single line of internet, and it's just not enough bandwidth. So we provide hotspots to families that have 3 or more students. We also provide hotspots to students or families who do not qualify for our Internet Essentials program. Some of the other criteria are students and families in different situations where maybe they are staying with a grandmother during the day or at a daycare provider who doesn't have internet service. We will provide them with a hotspot. You just need to call our office, leave your phone number and a message, and we will get back to you within 24 hours. Okay?
Thank you so much. Oh,
Yeah,
no,
of course. No, I was just going to say we also have a limited number of devices available too, and we have more ordered as well. So if for whatever reason they are unable to connect and get devices at a school site, please call our office. We are here to help.
Thank you. Board Member Pritchett.
Thank you, President Ryan. Just in terms of the hot spots, I know you said to call your office. Are you talking about calling the district office or calling the school office?
So you can do it either way. If you want to contact your school office directly, that's fine. They will then contact us in turn. Right now, we are doing it centrally so we can track and monitor where the hotspots are and who has the hotspots and which schools have the highest need, so that if in the future we need to order more for a particular community or area, we will do so. So right now, it's a centralized process.
Okay, so I can tell you that I've spoken with many parents that have no idea that we were even offering hotspots. So I know, I mean, if they're having trouble with Wi-Fi, they're probably not watching this board meeting. And so I'm just wondering if is there any way that we can reach out to the school sites and finding out through their teachers if they need these hotspots or if they have multiple children. I know at several board meetings now, I've brought up the fact that I've talked to many of my constituents that have, 3 or 4 children at home. They're on the Internet Essentials program, and when they're expected to all be on class time at the same time, they're being dropped off of their Internet Essentials. So, but when I reached out to them and said, what about hotspots? They had no idea that that even existed.
Yeah, I want to apologize first that communication wasn't out there. We did inform principals, but there's been so much going on with the beginning of the school year and trying to just get distance learning going that I'm afraid that it might have slipped through the cracks. On our learn.scusd.edu website, it does say if you need help connecting to the internet or you're having issues, please contact our office. We can distinguish hotspots on there as well.
Ms. Kreshman, one final comment and request. I think it would behoove us to do text messages to all school sites where we have the capability of text messaging families to let them know how to sign up for a hotspot if they need it to expand their connectivity. I also think it would be very good to have a district-wide robocall that goes out on this issue, just to make sure we're hitting multiple ways of reaching our families and students, because if they can't connect, they can't learn.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. We will work on that.
Moving on to the next item, 7.
Hello. Sorry. I have a question. This is Leticia.
Hi, Leticia.
And I am experiencing major glitches today, so I'll be in and out, just like of the video. But thank you, Jennifer, for all this incredible work. Super important, especially important and difficult in a virtual learning environment. So much appreciated. I am just also wanting to suggest that maybe on the home site of our school district to have something that really pops in terms of additional need for hotspots or devices that so a parent doesn't have to look for it. It's just right there. It's actually something that came from one of our parents that it's something that they had heard, and I appreciate Board Member Pritchett's sort of a question about the outreach. But it seems as though that maybe even on the landing page on the district website, that it can just be front and center. And I know this is all, it's the beginning of the school year. We're still trying to figure out what's working, what isn't working, what needs to be improved. So, but at the same time, it's important. So, and now I'm going off video so I can hear the rest of the conversation.
I absolutely hear everything that you're saying, and I will work to make it more visible and communicate better about the hotspots and what we have available.
And board members, if I can just ask you, so I don't have a screen view of everyone right now. I'm trying to do my best to call on people, but if you can do 2 things, if you have questions tonight, both raise your hand visually and also raise your hand in the chat box, which I have up. That way I have a couple different ways to try and monitor as we're trying to navigate this virtual board reality. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Item 7.2, resolution number 3167, National Suicide Prevention and Recovery Month.
Madam President, we haven't voted on resolution 316. Vote and roll call.
I have a resolution 3166.
I just had a quick comment really quick regarding just the hots. Can you hear me? Okay. In addition to the outreach, I think what I'm hearing from board members today also regarding the hotspot is just the communication pieces. My understanding is that there could be limited hotspots, and I think it's important for us as a school district to just be really transparent on how we're providing those hotspots. What are the different tiered levels, right? Priorities in terms of need for those students and families. And I just think from this conversation that hasn't been clear. And so as we're relaying that information out to our families and the public, I want to make sure there's clarity around that, because I know there are limited hotspots, and I want to make sure that it's clear on what the priorities are in terms of which families will be receiving them first, based on their situation. So,
Absolutely.
President Ryan, I moved resolution 3166.
I second it.
Okay, and this is a roll call vote. So
Student
Superintendent,
preferential vote. Sorry. Student preferential.
Aye.
Member Ryan,
aye.
Member Pritchett,
Aye.
Member Minnick,
Aye.
Member Morowski,
Aye.
Member Garcia,
Aye.
Member Vang,
yes.
Member Wu.
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Item 7.2, resolution number 3167, National Suicide Prevention and Recovery Month. This evening will be presented by Victoria Flores and our student board member, Issa Shea.
Good evening, Board President Ryan, Superintendent, and members of the board. I'm Victoria Flores. I serve as your Director of Student Support and Health Services, and I'm presenting tonight with Student Board Member Shake. First, I just want to say how deeply grateful I am for the recognition and the importance that our superintendent and our board have always given both physical and mental well-being and wellness of our students, our staff, and our entire community. I also just want to show my gratitude for all of our SUSD staff who every day, every single staff member, no matter what position they serve in, they notice, they respond, and they care really deeply. This work is very confidential and it's very quiet. You shouldn't typically hear about it, but it happens every day, almost every hour. We are supporting a student in need or a family in need, or sometimes a colleague in need, honestly. And so one of the best ways we know to prevent suicide is to notice it, say something, to ask that question, which can be really hard and difficult to do, but that really is the intervention. The other thing we can do is we can use our platform to bring awareness to this issue. So just like tonight, Ketchum talked about her and her peers used their platform and their agency to bring awareness to these issues. We've got a group of young people called the Sacramento Youth Mental Health Group who are hosting a series of webinars, completely youth-driven and youth-created and hosted. And so we encourage you to check those out. They're really great. And then, of course, I'm so deeply grateful to our student board member, Shake, who's using his voice and his platform to speak to the importance of suicide prevention. So with that, I am going to turn it over to our student board member.
Thank you so much, Ms. Flores, for presenting tonight's resolution, as well as for writing the bulk of it, and also all the work that our staff in Student Support and Health Services does every week. I also want to thank Member Morowski for suggesting this resolution and reaching out to me so we could present tonight. A large priority of mine as student board member is to focus on mental health and to move forward, as Ms. Flores recognizes. We really need to destigmatize suicidal feelings and mental health struggles faced by not only students but staff. And I was talking to somebody today, and it's really monumental that we're talking about this issue in as big a forum as we are tonight. And that's a huge advancement from somebody 20 or 30 years ago. And I think that's really encouraging moving forward, that we can continue to move on that path towards destigmatizing issues like this one, so that people aren't scared of being crazy if they bring it up to their peers or seek help when they are feeling mental issues. I wanted to point out three of the whereas statements in our resolution. We're not going to read it out loud. But there are some really important data points that are surprising. One of which is a study of SUSD students finding that, or Sacramento students finding that 65% of youth don't know where to go to get help. And it's really sad to see that there are all these support and services being offered and students not knowing to get them. To be honest, when I saw the 65% number, I thought that was low. I mean, most students I know do not have any idea of where to go if they face things like this. And their first line will always be their peers if they do reach out to anybody. And so I think we do need to move forward and prioritize communication and getting people to know that they have services not only locally but nationally. And the student groups that Ms. Flores mentioned are doing a good job of that. Another one is that 1 in 5 SCSD kids have considered suicide in the past 12 months. That took my breath away. That's incredible. And it just points to the fact that this is a much bigger issue than we like to think it is. And that we really, really need to get a hold of letting people communicate their feelings before it becomes serious. I know we've seen a string of both recent graduates and current students in the Sacramento area committing this year, and it's heartbreaking that suicide is completely preventable. Another one is a more national look at the effects of the pandemic on people. A recent study shows that the people experiencing symptoms of depression hasn't doubled, but it's tripled in the time that we've been at home. And I think it's important to recognize the effects of the increased social isolation and not getting to see people at school for students is really contributing to their worsening mental health. And that has a number of ramifications for us. So let's continue to raise awareness and support our students, starting with this very simple resolution. It's a symbol of solidarity to proclaim September as Suicide Prevention and Recovery Month. And I'm glad we're doing that today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, we do, Board Member Ryan. We have one public comment. It's a joint public comment on behalf of the Coalition for Students with Disabilities by Angie Sutherland, Angel Garcia, Sarah Williams Kingsley, and Renee Webster Hawkins. We thank the board and district for creating this important resolution. The resolution states that the recent California Healthy Kids survey of SUSD students indicated that on average, 1 in 5 students has considered suicide in the past 12 months. It would be important to know if SUSD actually tracks suicidal ideation, incidents, and demographic information along with this, rather than relying only on survey responses. When a student expresses suicidal ideation to their teacher or an adult at school, the response to the student is very critical and an official report needs to be made. In some of our children's experiences, this has not happened and students were made to feel like their feelings and emotions were unwarranted and they were causing their problems. This cannot happen if we say we want to increase awareness of and access to mental health supports, help to prevent and overcome mental health challenges, including self-harm, suicide, substance abuse, and other dangerous behaviors. Bullying is also closely tied with suicide. It was disheartening to learn that SCUSD did not track data on bullying motivation in 2018-19 and only partially tracked it in 2017-18. It will be interesting to see what the data says for 2019-20. For example, in the 2017-18 school year, the number of bullying reports per responsive records received was 171. Of this number, the district tracked that 52 listed a motivation for the bullying. The breakdown is as follows: appearance, 12; race, 12; sexual orientation, 11; disability, 10; sexual harassment, 6; and religion, 1. The motivation for bullying was not listed for 119 of the cases in 2017-2018. We are not sure if this was omitted on the complaint or was not tracked.
In addition, the district stated it did not track the motivation for bullying at all in 2018-19. In a high-needs district like SCUSD, this is unacceptable. The coalition also requested responsive records that were not provided on the number of substantiated versus unsubstantiated cases of bullying, harassment, and discrimination. We are still waiting for this information that was requested last December. In addition, the district is not taking advantage of the resources of community partners. The coalition will need to inquire further to gain a clearer understanding about the frequency of bullying, types of bullying, and the responses to bullying. How can SCUSD really develop targeted emotional supports if they are not tracking these related issues? Our call to action is to put more action behind this cause, and we are here to help. That was it. Board President Ryan.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ariana. Do we have any questions from board members? Board Member Morawski.
Thank you. I wanted to thank Victoria and Board Member Sheikh for bringing this forward. You did a beautiful job presenting the importance and the urgency of the issue. Just a couple things to add. I think the statistic was 20% for our SCUSD students, which just is heartbreaking. It seems way too high. Among our LGBTQ youth in general, it's about twice that. So I think we need to pay attention to subgroups that are even more likely to have these issues. One suicide is too many for our district. This is extremely important that we bring this forward and talk about it. In terms of raising awareness, as Victoria mentioned, it's not, it shouldn't be stigmatized to ask about if you're feeling suicidal. That stigma is actually more harmful. People usually talk about it, and that's one thing that I've learned in my suicide prevention training that I did. So I think we just have to help each other get the word out there. And there are these great trainings that we can all do, so we can all build awareness within our community. So many of us are feeling under so much pressure these days, and we do need to look out for each other. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your words, Member Morawski. Very poignant. Our Deputy Superintendent, Lisa Allen, I believe is not on mute, and we're picking up some background noise. I do have one question for Victoria Flores. I am very concerned, and I think Isa articulated it beautifully, that especially in a virtual climate, we have the opportunity for more youth to feel disconnected, more youth to feel the stress and pressure of being alone or being confined in a space with people who might not necessarily be as accepting of them. And so I would like to just hear you very quickly respond to this notion of how do we, in a virtual environment and online learning, when we know so much of the bullying that occurs is occurring in an online format these days, make sure that we are connecting with the disconnected and engaging youth, in particular our LGBTQ youth that we know are struggling deeply right now.
Yeah, and I think there's no one answer to that. It's many, many pathways, and making sure that we continue to create those, from having extracurricular activities and clubs like our gender and sexuality alliances that are happening virtually, or our youth conferences that quickly pivoted to a Zoom format. And was it perfect? No, right? But people showed up and doing things like newsletters and just multiple outreaches and being responsive, honestly, when students reach out, really being quick to respond. And so we've been very, we've publicized all of our district cell phone numbers and email addresses so that we can continue to be very responsive. But, students will have connections, whether it's with each other or maybe other staff. And that's where I just can't stress enough how important it is to continue those connections, continue those live Zooms or face-to-faces or chats. And we have some guidance for teachers about that. We have some guidance specifically for students who identify as LGBT you. Also, some guidance for our students who are experiencing homelessness or residing in foster care. There are some real critical things that we can do and say, and times we really want to check in.
Thank you so much, Victoria. I don't see, oh, looks like Board Member Pritchett has a comment.
No comment. I would just like to move to approve Resolution 3167.
Do we have a second? The Board Member Minnick, student preferential vote.
Aye.
And this is a roll call vote. Superintendent Aguilar.
Member Ryan,
Aye.
Member Pritchett,
Aye.
Member Minnick,
Aye.
Member Morowski,
Aye.
Member Garcia, Member Garcia,
Aye.
Member Vang,
Yes.
Member Wu.
Aye.
Okay. With that, the motion carries. Thank you again to the entire team for your work. We know that these are very difficult and uncharted territories, and our students need you so much right now. With that, we're going to move on to item 8.0, public comment. First Vice President Pritchett, I'm going to need you to take over for a bit at this point. Thank you.
We have a total of 4 live comments, and our first live comment is on by Rose McAuliffe.
Can you go on to the next person? Give me 2 minutes and I'll come back. Is that okay?
Sure.
We
can do that. Go ahead, Olga.
Okay, so we don't have any other live comments on, so I'm going to go ahead and go into the written comments, if that's okay.
Yes, that is absolutely okay.
Okay, thank you. Our first written comment is by Evelyn Guzman. The schedule is very unprofessional. You guys say you guys care about our health and to limit our screen time, yet expect us to stare at a screen 80 minutes at a time. This is insane. You guys are taking advantage of us students. The world doesn't revolve around you guys. Just because we are home doesn't mean that we don't have other responsibilities to take care of at home. You guys give us endless assignments. I'm tired of this, and it's barely been a week. I hate it here. Thank you for your time. Sylvan Quaddy. I already made a comment to the superintendent, but I want it to be heard again. My fellow students and I are having a hard time with the amount of time that we are spending on the computers. It feels like we are being assigned busy work, which just keeps us on the screen for longer. When we were told that our health was a priority, I have spent the last 2 days after Zoom just doing homework on my computer. I started to get a headache today, so I took a break. But now I have a bunch of work to do, so I have to get back to the computer. It really just feels like too much time spent on the screen. I don't have time to go outside or do other things that are important for my mental health. Abby Harris. As a student, I think the start time of the school should be earlier. I do not like how late we get out of school. So if we went earlier, we would get out earlier. Also, I think we should have a school Mondays. I don't think we should do the optional Monday for only 30 minutes per class. I actually want to learn this year, and I don't think this is the way to do it. I just want to go back to school, but I know that isn't even an option for the district right now. Although we can't go back, I think we should do our best to make it close to school as possible. As a freshman, I really want to get a good education so I can get to a good college. I hope we can change something for our schools.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, Superintendent Aguilar and members of the board. My name is Rose McAuliffe. I am the elected treasurer of the CAC, which is the Community Advisory Committee for Special Education. Earlier this week, Tuesday, the CAC held its first meeting for the academic year. We would like to thank Chief Academic Officer Christine Beta, SELPA Director Becky Bryant, and Stephen Ramirez Fong, the LCAP coordinator, for sharing the LCAP plan with the CAC membership. We had 59 participants on Tuesday. A portion of the meeting featured a question and answer session, which was a continuation of our September 2nd special meeting. In both meetings, parents had the opportunity to ask questions directly to our district administrators. We are delighted to share that during the earlier September 2nd meeting, there were well over 100 parents participating, and board members Christine Pritchett, Jesse Ryan, and Lisa Morawski were present. Thank you. At both meetings, families shared their struggles and expectations. This letter expresses some of their concerns. First, families were disappointed to hear that the district has not started an active plan regarding in-person learning. Some of our families shared their willingness to participate in a hybrid model for their students. This includes in-person one-on-one aid support. Parents shared their concern regarding their children's regression and the manner in which they are not able to access their curriculum. To address this concern and to mitigate the learning loss, we request that the school district answer the following questions by September 28th. 1. How many students in the Sacramento City Unified School District receive one-on-one aid support before the pandemic? Once we have the answer, question 2. What were the total number of aides specifically employed by Sacramento City Unified School District, and how many were employed by vendors before the pandemic? Then we request the district to administer a survey with the deadline of October 1st for parents whose children receive special education services via the one-on-one aid support with proposed questions. 1. How are aides currently being utilized via Zoom? 2. Would you consider letting an aide into your home for in-person learning if you signed a waiver? And 3, are you open to in-person learning in small cohorts or select school campuses? During the September 3rd board meeting, board member Morawski shared with the public her resolution. Although we did not take a formal CAC membership vote, we do believe that our request aligns with board member Morawski's resolution. Second, families shared their concerns regarding Zoom security, including Zoom bombings and adults accessing student accounts for possible child exploitation purposes. Moreover, some students with disabilities are being required to record themselves exercising for their physical education classes. We understand students are required to follow the curriculum. However, we were shocked to hear of such a requirement. Most of our members consider this an invasion of privacy and fear videos of students being compromised. In addition, a community member shared, I'm sorry, that's not a sentence. Okay. Third, meeting participants expressed support for implementing the multi-tier system of support, MTSS. We appreciate hearing that teachers are being trained and ask that district staff follow up and report on the degree the training is being successfully implemented to improve academic achievement. Members also expressed the desire to see specific academic growth targets for students with disabilities, foster youth, unsheltered youth, transportation, and transition services identified in the LCAP, and that funding from various resources, including LCF, state lottery, Title I and Title II, be used to aggressively support the implementation of MTSS. Finally, the impact of COVID-19 has overwhelmed our community. Members of the CAC executive team have requested publicly and privately additional time to communicate our report during board meetings. The CAC Special Education Ad Hoc Budget Subcommittee has continued to work collaboratively with our board liaison, Lisa Morawski, and our special education department to do a deep dive to better understand the special education budget. We understand the special education department is understaffed. However, receiving special education services are general education students first. Therefore, we request Superintendent Aguilar and school board members to supply our requests for administrative support and the data which we've previously requested. It's been months now. We've requested data from the special education back in May of 2020, and before that it was asked as well. To view our videos of the meetings and the notes, you can visit our Facebook page and see all of the questions and answers, which was over 30 questions from the Special Education Department representatives. Our Facebook page is CAC Community Advisory Committee for Special Education /SCUSD. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. And we also welcome you to email your comments to the board as well.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you. Olga, do we have any additional public comment?
Yes, we do. We have one from Alyssa Kim. I object to the current schedule in place made by the teachers at West Campus High School that starts at 9:30 instead of 8:10, as it is both inefficient and ineffective for students during this school year. Starting at 9:30 a.m. affects not only the time we get out of school, but also the amount of work that can be completed. By waking up earlier, we are able to focus just as well during online classes in the morning, but at the same time be able to look forward to more time in the afternoon to complete asynchronous work, allowing students to have more freedom in terms of pacing and productivity. Although the current schedule disagrees with this argument, I believe it makes the most sense. Taking the opposing side into account, it gives teachers more flexibility in terms of their own preferences in scheduling. Starting earlier allows more time for students to ask for help during active office hours and clears more space in the evenings for activities unrelated to school, being with family, playing games, reading a book, watching TV, as well as personal responsibilities such as chores, walking the dog, etc. Suggesting that there would be 2 periods instead of 1 before lunch, it just makes sense to start earlier, all the while still retaining a good time for students to pick up lunches from campuses if need be. Say you are deciding to work out in the cool morning sunshine or the tired, sluggish afternoons. Which one would you choose? The shared idea is to simply get everything done with. Relating back to having 2 periods before lunch, we would rather get a majority of the work done before taking a long deserved break. However, now we take a break only an hour and 20 minutes after we start. Where's the reward in that? Where's the sigh of relief reminding yourself there's only 1 period to go until the end of class? Speaking in the point of view of seniors or anyone who has only 2 periods a day, finishing school before lunch instead of waiting another hour to finish would be so much more beneficial. Next comment by Marlena Bigger. Having already gone through 1 week of school, I understand how exhausting Zoom can be. In my opinion, teachers do not need 1 hour and 20 minutes to explain a concept. I hate sitting and staring at a screen for that long, 3 times a day. I would prefer the Zoom meetings to be far shorter and teachers can post links or videos with the subject matter instead. I also do not understand the point to Zooming all 6 classes on Monday. I would love to instead have a free day to work on homework assignments. In conclusion, please reduce the time spent on Zoom. Next, we have Grace Toby. I think that the school schedule should start earlier and end earlier. I don't have enough time after school to complete homework. Haley Stevens. I wish that West Campus would follow the district schedule because it was much better for a lot of us. I don't like it, and my wish is to go back to district schedule, please. Christina Stevens. Please, can Sacramento high schools be on the same schedule? Preferably the district schedule. Jenny Haley. This district is not considering students' needs by pushing distance learning with no end plan in sight. Other districts have invested heavily in online learning programs to make it successful for a short term or longer. There is no plan to return to campus for parents to be able to choose what is best for their students. The district ceased all inter-district transfers months ago for students who want to attend in-person or hybrid school in an open neighboring county. Michael Sullivan. I just received the district's notification on the new grading policy. Essentially, a student can now not get a lower grade than half credit. turn in a blank sheet of paper with your name on it, get half credit. This is insane. The lowering of standards within this district is more than concerning. By implementing this policy, you are doing a severe disservice to students. This is not how the real world works. You're essentially just giving a high school diploma away for free. You're teaching a terrible life lesson and cheapening the diploma earned by hardworking students who actually earned it. Under this system, a student can turn in blank sheets all year long, then do one high value assignment, and then pass the class. Instead of this horrendous policy, you should instead have a district-wide policy on extra credit for grade recovery. This way, students who are unable to complete assignments for good reason, or even those who are lazy, have a legitimate path to earn a passing grade. Carolyn Kudak. My family left the district because of 3 bad experiences. 1. Kindergarten at Alice Burney was violent. I complained and was told to leave the school. See Yelp review. We left a long paper trail so anyone who could see what happened, including calling in ombudsman. Also, a child was hurt after we left, so I felt lucky to get out of that experience. 2. A teacher on a field trip shook my son in front of me because he was scared of crowds and ran. He was 7. I reported to principal, but nothing was done. That year was an awful experience for everyone. 3. Distance learning was dysfunctional, chaotic, and when you asked for help, the teacher was really reactionary. I realized this was never getting any better. Also, we were scared of the district finances and the teacher retaliations against children and parents who complained. Randy Balserano. I wanted to comment on the current situation my 2 daughters are facing. I realize it is not easy for anyone who, however, the patience is running low on some of these teachers that are just plain poor. They are sophomores in high school. They have been faced with teachers that do not know how to use the Zoom app. Why in God's name did these teachers not get taught on how to use this teaching tool? I heard from a teacher who is on the union board that it was briefly gone over in one meeting, but not in depth. My daughters have had teachers who did not show up because they did not know how. Ones that did not know how to turn on the volume, and others that gave out incorrect login codes, then blamed the students for being late. This takes me into my next frustration, which is the teachers' attitudes. They seem to have this nasty controlling attitude that is not going over too well. They need to be more engaging and less controlling. The next point is about homework. My daughters were given a ton of homework over the weekend. A little would be fine. However, one teacher gave a project that was due on Sunday. This is not okay, and to be honest, ridiculous. These students are logging enough screen time during the whole episode. They should not have to be online doing homework for hours over the weekend. I have had one older child go through this system already and have not been in the least impressed with the teachers, administrators, school district, so-called leaders, or the teachers' union. These so-called educators need to stop asking for more money and benefits, pull their heads out of their butts, and do their jobs. My daughter said, "Dad, they had all summer to come up with 2 plans, one for in-school and one for distance learning, and they could not get it done." I'll say I'm extremely hopeful for the future because of the new principal put in place. Next comment by Tanya Muskov. My comment is for both SCUSD and SETA. The bickering and lack of being able to come to an agreement between these 2 groups are forcing parents to move out of the district. After observing a sharp decline at SCUSD, I have moved my 2 children out of this dysfunctional system and what often seems like a petty feud between these 2 groups that has no end in sight. Please do better to resolve issues with each other so that students and administrators can move forward in a positive educational environment. No one will win if a state receivership happens, and only students will be left to lose. We have SEUSD in anticipation of what seems like the inevitable state receivership. Please do better for the students with resolving your differences.
Can I just ask, we don't have a quorum online at the moment. Can I ask the board member? There we go. Thank you, Member Garcia.
May I continue?
Yes.
Okay. Next comment by Jennifer Nelson. I am frustrated, sad, and disappointed with the needless and bitter arguing between SEUSD and SETA. I support teachers being paid a fair wage and obtaining the resources, support, and training they need to teach their classes. I also support the district in addressing the long-standing fiscal problems, making education more equitable, and having a suite of schools across the city where parents are excited to send their child because they are the best in the county. More importantly, and above all else, I support my child. I am the mother of a sophomore at Rosemont High School. She likes her teachers, is able to play sports, and is involved in activities. However, as a parent, I need to do what is best for my child. When my daughter was in 8th grade, we toured high schools in and out of the district. We chose Rosemont, Lead over Rio Americano, St. Francis, West, and McClatchy HISP. I am once again considering private school or out of district because I'm very worried that she will be failed by you. The two schedule chaos almost broke the camel's back. I want my child to go to a school with different ethnicities and socioeconomic groups. I want a quality education for my child. I want to support public schools. I am not trained to teach and cannot homeschool. I don't want to argue with her when I put her out of Rosemont. I don't want to see her tears as she yells that she hates me. For a brief moment, I imagine what we could have here in Sacramento if you all shed your mindset and thought, what if I met the union halfway? What if the district's proposal has some good nuggets in there that we can move forward? Imagine the kids that you can serve because you are not fighting on budget numbers or fuming over David Weist. I am commenting as a parent and also an active leadership supporter and volunteer roles, including PTA, PTO positions at both Crocker Riverside and California Middle School. I have already removed my now high school freshman from the district with the impasse between the SETA and the district. We are considering removing our son who has just started middle school. The fact that the SETA is taking such a hard line and not willing to budge on their position or even consider proposal by the district is ridiculous. The fact that the district will also not bend from their guidelines and consider a little flexibility to allow the teachers to adapt us to specific situations is also ridiculous. It seems to observers that each side is more concerned about being right than coming together to create a solution that benefits the students they are ultimately here to serve. No one is winning with the stalemate created by SETA and SEUSD, but there is clearly a loser, the students in the district. As parents, we can't stand and watch, and it seems the only option we are being given is to let you all keep fighting while our kids suffer, or to use our feet and leave the district so our children don't suffer from the fighting that seems so important to you all to continue to do. From the outside, it seems that your ultimate goal is to inflict the most pain to the other side. Please grow up and do what is best for the students and not your side. Come to a solution and let the teachers teach and the students learn. Donna Huntingdale. We left SEUSD for charter and private school options. We first left because my second grade son at the time was not getting his needs met in acknowledging and addressing that his learning style was different than the public school system would accommodate. My 5th grade daughter at the same time earned an opportunity to attend a local charter school, which we accepted. Now my son is in 6th grade, where the decision for middle school choice is upon us, and my daughter is in 9th. Having made the decision after touring, considering returning to SEUSD for high school, decided to stay at her charter through high school. With distance learning acting as a canary in the mine shaft of SEUSD's challenges, I am so grateful she stayed where she is, where the school and teachers are organized, communicative, and clearly focused on the kids' best interest. And despite our plan as of last year for our sixth grader to return to SEUSD for middle school, we are seriously reconsidering that direction. I can't imagine choosing to have him re-enter into the mess that currently exists. I truly hope for our community that SEUSD and SCTA can learn to work with their end user students in mind, putting differences in perspective with how the fighting affects the children. A lack of an effective public school system in our city is instead the effect currently being achieved. Erika Torre. We have removed both of our children from Sac City schools. Both my children have chosen a different type of learning that works better for them due to COVID, but we have been frustrated with the lack of progress on SEUSD getting their act together for the children, and honestly, it's nice to take a step back from the constant negativity. Shouldn't be that much of a struggle for all these professionals to work together. That being said, I hope something can happen soon, as our children and neighborhood deserve it. Allison Lal. Stop treating classified workers as expendable. To have office staff report to school sites is in direct disregard of State of California Health Department guidelines and classified workers' health. I'm sure you all have children or family members in your household. Well, so do we, and I would be devastated if I brought home COVID from work and gave it to my immunocompromised family members. All the work that can be done remotely should be done remotely. Robin Muchler. Hello, I am an office technician at JFK. Once office staff are being required to report to their school sites to do work that can be done remotely. According to the Department of Public Health, if work can be done remotely, it should be done remotely. I am asking the school board to send us home. We can enroll students remotely. Phone calls can be forwarded. It is unsafe and unnecessary for office staff to be at school sites. Many of our school sites do not have the proper setup to allow for a safe work site setup, such as hand washing stations and office dividers. Many office spaces are too small to physically distance properly. Office staff are being unnecessarily put at risk by our employer. Alina Cervantes. Critical services and supports for children with special needs can't be provided without a distance learning agreement. With no agreement, some of the services that could be provided in person now for students with high needs are being held up. With no agreement, the district has to forego providing services to students from outside vendors who are willing to do them, because it would be inequitable if some received it and some did not. It is not only a disgrace that we don't have a distance learning agreement, it is exacerbating existing inequities for our most vulnerable children. The district proposed the plan to SCTA over the summer. This is shameful. The district made a concession to reduce the total daily minutes down to the level proposed by SCTA. So what is SCTA willing to concede? Children's critical services should not be put on hold any longer. Sarah Williams Kingsley. Our students are now in their first full week of distance learning. Since the district and SCTA could not agree on a distance learning MOU, unfortunately, students across the district are receiving a hodgepodge of offerings that are not reliably equitable. As Sacramento County Superintendent Dave Gordon mentioned in his interview with Capital Public Radio, some teachers are freelancing. What does freelancing teachers look like in practice? It looks like some students received a pile of textbooks to supplement their access to the online curriculum, while others received none. While all textbooks are online, using them requires internet bandwidth that may be an issue. It would have been much simpler to understand this as an issue of equity and access and default to providing both options to students instead of making students proactively ask for physical materials. While this issue is fixable, it shouldn't have been an issue in the first place. Teachers freelancing is how we ended up with some middle and high school PE teachers asking students to submit videos of themselves doing PE to get class credit. Let me say that again. Teenage students were asked to record themselves doing jumping jacks and send those videos to their teachers for class credit. Uncomfortable? Everyone should be uncomfortable that someone has a collection of videos of students doing jumping jacks. Asking students to submit videos feels like a violation of every other instruction we have given our kids about online safety. Again, there were better options. Other teachers are using a much more reasonable workout log. Guidelines on how to provide PE via distance learning would have prevented this issue. A third issue of equity and access in distance learning is the issue of cameras during Zoom sessions. Some teachers require students to leave them on, some don't. Some require use of backgrounds, some require no backgrounds. Tanya Gibson Naiman. To preface my comment, I want to state that I am a huge supporter of public education. My husband was a teacher for 10 years and my mother retired after 30 years of teaching. Some of my earliest memories are standing on the picket line with her during a strike for better wages and conditions. Quality public schools are critical for the success of a neighborhood and a city. So it was with great sadness and anguish that we decided to pull our children from the district this summer. We loved the public school we were at. Shout out to Washington Elementary. But ultimately, the straw that broke the camel's back for us was the continued acrimony and dysfunction between the district and teachers' union. It was an extremely difficult decision to make, but that decision was confirmed for us in the fall as we watched SCUSD and the union continue to butt heads, which led to confusion and frustration at the start of the new year. We are in the middle of a pandemic, just trying to survive. And on top of it, we have to bear witness to what amounts to a fight between parents on the verge of divorce. Each side is deep in their bunkers, hardened in their position, adamant that they are right, just waiting to attack at the slightest perceived wrong done by the other. And while both sides are slinging bombs, the children and families of this district are held hostage and suffering from this warfare. So we left. And others like us, those with privilege to do so, will leave as well. So continue fighting, continue pointing fingers, and you all will continue to dig the hole deeper and deeper and push more and more families away. The only way to get through this is for the leaders of each group, district, union, board, to show some courage, humility, and grace, and put out an olive branch and sit down and find a path forward. And I don't mean an 80... Emily Misokami. I would like to respectfully request that the board and other district staff keep to the timeline presented at the last board meeting by Nathaniel Browning of the Facilities Department and keep to their commitment to rename Sutter Middle, Kit Carson, and Peter Burnett Elementary. Please respect the over 1,300 petition signers, California Indian community, and others who have looked forward to this moment for years. From the Community Advisory Committee, and make appropriate appointments by your next board meeting. Thank you for all of your work so far on this important effort. And our next public comment is comments by Mr. David Fisher, President of the Sacramento City Teachers Association. Good evening. I'm David Fisher, the President of the Sacramento City Teachers Association. I want to spend some time talking about our negotiations with the district regarding distance learning. This summer, teachers met with the district more than 25 minutes in an effort to reach an agreement on distance learning. 25 times in an effort to reach an agreement on distance learning. SCTA's bargaining team consists of 85 classroom teachers at every level, school nurses, librarians, program specialists, psychologists, counselors, a wide variety of special education teachers, and others. As part of the bargaining process, teachers participated in approximately 9 work group discussions, which included elementary, middle school, and high school teachers, music teachers, physical education teachers, career and technical teachers, school nurses, and others. More than 200 certificated employees were directly involved in helping to create our proposal that included the input of more than 1,000 others, as well as hundreds of parents and students. In contrast, according to Chief Academic Officer Christine Bieda, the district's proposals were developed by her and one other cabinet-level administrator. 2 CERNA Center administrators with no direct experience teaching in a distance learning model. Both the teachers and the district wanted something significantly different and better than the distance learning program the district unlawfully, unilaterally implemented in the spring. The spring plan was the district's plan. By all accounts, it was not successful. Unfortunately, rather than learn from the spring, district administrators acting on behalf of this school board repeated and in fact doubled down on its complete unwillingness to trust Sac City teachers. The district's bargaining team was disrespectful and dismissive of the teachers' ideas, and it was so unnecessary. That disrespect starts at the top. The superintendent failed to show the slightest respect for teachers by not even attending a single bargaining session, but never failed to follow up with inaccurate and self-serving letters describing discussions that he was not part of. Proclaiming these discussions as the top priority of the district, but apparently not important enough for him to be directly involved, unlike superintendents from neighboring school districts. What's at the heart of our dispute with the district on distance learning? We agree on the total number of instructional minutes. We agree on the length of the workday. We agree on the curriculum that will be taught, and we agree that students should be assessed. But at its heart, the district acting on behalf of this board does not trust the professional judgment of teachers. It appears that the district is more concerned about having a distance learning plan that looks rigorous on paper, but has no practical means of actually being successful. One that purports to address the concerns of equity, but one that actually perpetuates and increases the inequities district administrators claim to want to address. Our negotiations around distance learning provided an opportunity to reset the relationship between teachers in Sac City and district administrators and the school board. That opportunity has been lost. But it's important to know that no matter who sits on the school board or who is the superintendent, Sacramento City teachers will do what they always do. They will teach their hearts out for the students of this district. That is what they have always done, and that is what they will continue to do, even if it takes engaging in concerted activity to accomplish that. Thank you. Next comment is by Tina Borgman. Why is there not an attendance calendar or trimester semester schedules posted on the district website? We started school 10 days ago. No calendar that identifies when holidays and breaks are scheduled. While many are not traveling far during these COVID times, it is important for students, families to know what day school is in session. I'm sure staff would also appreciate knowing for certain when they have days off, rather than relying on what has been the plan in the past. I am attaching a screenshot of the district website taken this Wednesday, September 16th afternoon, which so proudly boasts how unorganized this district really is. And the final comment for Item 8.0 is joint comment on behalf of the Coalition for Students with Disabilities by Angie Sutherland, Angel Garcia, Renee Webster Hawkins. As confirmed by Director Bryant at the September 15th Special Education CAC meeting, that SEUSD has been under several different review processes with CDE related to lack of compliance with disability laws and the education code and chronic systemic deficiencies, and the district requires targeted assistance and comprehensive monitoring to provide appropriate and effective educational services for students with disabilities. As parents, we would like to know why the findings and interventions needed are not being discussed in detail publicly at the board meetings and CAC meetings. A comprehensive list of the findings, the proposed resolutions, and CDE's responses should be available for the board members and stakeholder community. Will the CAC, the families, and the students with disabilities be informed of these issues, and will they have a voice? After the board approves the stopgap LCA plan later this evening, the stopgap LCAP plan later this evening, the LCAP PAC and the district stakeholders will begin preparing the LCAP annual update due later this year. The Coalition for Students with Disabilities is issuing this call to action. The LCAP plan must include all educational programs, services, and expenditures for students with disabilities, complete with measurable improvements in outcomes for our 7,000 plus students. Students with disabilities are general education students first. Additionally, over 70% of students on IEPs are also members of unduplicated student groups required to be supported by LCFF funds and the LCAP. Given the history of systemic segregation and disproportionate treatment of students with disabilities in our district, as educational leaders, it would be your responsibilities and privilege if you fail to design the LCAP and your budget for all students as a true reflection of your commitment to equity. You have a chief budget officer who has experience including the budget and expenditures for special education services in a single LCAP. And you have a chief academic officer who is a champion of inclusion. Please accept this call to action and direct staff to begin drafting the annual LCAP update with all programs and funding for students with disabilities in the LCAP.
Thank you, Olga. That was the last public comment.
And that was the last public comment unless the live comments came on, but we did not see the live public comments that were on earlier.
Okay, thank you. All right, item 9.0, board workshops, strategic plan, and other initiatives. 9.1, approve the provisional internship permit request for certificated employees. Concy McCarn and Tiffany Smith-Simmons, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Board Member Pritchett. Good evening, Board Members, Superintendent Aguilar. Actually presenting this item tonight for you will be Dr. Tiffany Smith-Simmons from Human Resources, Sarah Daw from Special Education, and Danny Hernandez from Ethel Phillips.
Next slide. Good evening. We are requesting approval to submit a provisional internship permit. The provisional internship permit was created in response to the phasing out of emergency permits previously issued, and it became effective July 1st, 2005. This permit allows school districts to fill immediate staffing needs by hiring an individual who has not yet met subject matter competence needed for eligibility of an intern credential. Next slide. This slide represents the number of these types of permits in our Sacramento area. You could see during the 2018-2019 school year, there were 18 provisional intern permits issued by CTC. This provisional permit differs from the declaration of need and waivers that were approved last month. We are seeking approval tonight to apply for a provisional intern permit. Next slide. Here is a 5-year glance back at our classroom vacancies on the first day of school. You can imagine a number of these vacancies fall in the hard to fill category, and with a number of them in special education positions, and in some cases representing 30% of the number. Next slide. I would like to ask Dr. Dahl to join us in our effort to explain our efforts in filling.
Yes. So we're fortunate to be a recipient of the Local Solutions Grant, and this grant does afford us the opportunity to recruit and retain education specialists. We're partnering together, special education and human resources together, to meet these goals and objectives set forth in the grant. And one of our major goals is to recruit and retain, of course, our education specialists. Next slide, please.
Principal Hernandez is going to speak about the specific permit that we're applying for a employee in our district.
Yes, as principal at Ethel Phillips Elementary, we've worked for the last year with Tyler Tutt, who's a young woman of color and has been in the classroom building relationships with both students and staff. For the sake of our students, in particular those in our special education classroom, I think it's vital to retain our African American role models, especially at this current time in our society. Keeping her in the classroom will also bring continuity to students during a time of much change. I urge your support. Thank you. Next slide, and I believe Tiffany will continue.
Thank you. Thank you, Principal Hernandez and Dr. Daw, for providing that additional context. By approving this application this evening, we're able to allow the teacher to continue her service to her students in her special day class and maintain consistency of the educational program she was able to establish last year. We thank you for your consideration and recommend you approve this permit. Next slide.
Perfect. Thank you. Olga, do we have any public comment?
We do not have public comment for 9.1.
All right. And it looks like we have President Ryan back. Would you like to take it from here?
Thank you so much, Vice President Pritchett. Do we have board member questions and comments on this item? Okay, Board Member Pritchett.
I just have a quick question in regard to the vacancies that you mentioned. Is that from the first day of school, and is that number current to today?
Board Member Pritchett, those vacancies represent the first day of school for those 5 years represented.
Okay, thank you. And where are we at now? Do you happen to know?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, maybe we can get it back on a board communication in a couple weeks. I'm sure it's going to take some time to even out.
Sure.
Okay, do we have any other board member questions or comments on this item? It looks like we have none. So this is an action item. Do we have a motion and a second?
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Second.
Student preferential vote.
Aye.
Roll call vote, please. Superintendent?
Member Ryan,
Aye.
Member Pritchett,
Aye.
Member Minnick,
Aye.
Member Morowski,
Aye.
Member Garcia, Member Garcia, Member Vang,
Yes.
Member Wu,
Aye.
Want me to go to Zoom?
Okay, so the motion carries. Moving on to item 9.2, the Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan Adoption, which will be presented this evening by Vincent Harris and Stephen Ramirez-Fong.
Good evening, Board President Ryan, Board Members, Superintendent Aguilar. My name is Vincent Harris. I'm the Chief of Continuous Improvement and Accountability. I'm here this evening with our LCAP SIPSA Coordinator, Mr. Ramirez-Fong, to present the Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan for board adoption. What I'll point out between this meeting and last meeting where we had the public hearing is that we've heard a lot of feedback from various stakeholders. And so we've been incorporating lots of that feedback. You will see some repetition of a few of the slides between the public hearing and the adoption, really to make sure that for those who weren't at the public hearing, they can have enough context to know what the plan is about and why it's critical for us. And as you see here, in terms of our key themes for this evening, we'll provide context, a summary of the revisions made, process, and of course, recommend adoption for the board. If we go to the next slide.
And Mr. Harris, if you can just wait for 1 second. For those of you that aren't muted, if you can please mute. We're hearing some voices in the background.
So ultimately, as we think about this plan in the context of the work of the system, one slide we didn't have in the public hearing, but we think is mission critical for it as we present for adoption this evening is the vision statement that we've discussed during the summer as we think about what our community stakeholders have told us. And then uniformly, we've heard this very important message around disrupting the status quo of systemic inequity to meet the academic, social, and emotional needs of all of our students, especially our most vulnerable students. Such disruption must result in higher learning standards and accountability. And so though the learning continuity and attendance plan is a snapshot plan, we definitely have sought to incorporate elements of this mission throughout it. If we go to the next slide. And really this plan comes from legislation that was approved back on June 29th, Senate Bill 98. And really, as you think about the elements of Senate Bill 98, they really do align well in terms of our aspirations for the plan, because Senate Bill 98 calls out the importance of addressing gaps in learning, addressing the needs of unduplicated pupils, students with unique needs, and students experiencing homelessness. And then most importantly, providing resources and supports to address student and staff mental health and social emotional well-being. And so as we think about our vision statement and what this plan includes, there really is a strong alignment. Next slide, please. One of the important feedback points we receive from multiple stakeholders is to make sure the plan addresses the context, and that's been spoken to quite a bit this evening. And so as we think about the plan in terms of the aspirations, we recognize some of those aspirations have to largely be agreed upon. And so what's important about this slide is just calling out those things that while we want them to be implement within the plan, we also recognize there's some contextual work that has to happen for those things to come to life. And so as we go through impasse and fact finding, we know that the things listed here, whether it's the amount of daily live instruction versus independent learning or the documentation of services provided to students with disabilities, we recognize those things need to be resolved in order to fully implement the plan. Next slide, please. And as we discussed last meeting, and just important to emphasize, we see the LCA plan as really a front load for our LCAP process. And I think we heard those statements during the public comment as well. And so while the LCA plan is seen as a snapshot of district work, really in the context of addressing distance learning and the impacts of COVID, we recognize that lots of the important feedback we received is going to lay the foundation for our strategic planning process, which is what the LCAP is. And so when we bring the final LCAP back for board adoption in June of 2021, to a large extent, you will see themes from our LCA plan snapshot included in the LCAP as well, because a lot of important points were made. At this point, I'll turn the presentation over to Mr. Stephen Ramirez.
Next slide, please. Good evening, board and superintendent. This slide is just a brief recap of the steps in our 2020-21 accountability process. And here we really want to draw your attention to the immediate next steps. If the County Office of Education, after receiving our approved plan, chooses to, they will issue recommendations. Upon receipt of those recommendations, we would have 15 days to consider those at a board meeting. And we have been in contact with our SCOE colleagues, and they'll be working with us to ensure that we can meet that timeline if they choose to issue recommendations. Next slide, please. This is a slide we shared during the public hearing, and it highlights some of the key stakeholder engagement events over the past few months. And again, we'll note that there's additional detail beyond what's in the plan on our website. Next slide, please. The next several slides, as Chief Harris noted, are a recap of what the key components are within the plan, so that stakeholders have a roadmap of what they're looking for. In our general information section, we describe the impacts of COVID on the district and the community. Inside the stakeholder engagement section, we detail our efforts to engage, feedback we received, and how that feedback has influenced the plan. And for our in-person instructional offerings, we describe what actions we're taking to offer classroom-based instruction, that of course being subject to our health recommendations. Next slide, please. The distance learning program section of the plan makes up that central section, and it includes our continuity of instruction, which is how we're ensuring that students have access to a full curriculum, regardless of the method of delivery, how we're making sure access to devices and connectivity is allowing for access to our distance learning program, assessing students' progress and participation. That also includes attendance, which you heard from some of our attendance folks earlier this evening, providing professional development and resources to staff so they can implement distance learning, defining some of the new roles and responsibilities that staff are taking on as a result of COVID's impacts, and also, as Chief Harris noted, providing additional supports to our students with unique needs. And then the additional sections in the plan would cover pupil learning loss, how are we measuring and addressing that learning loss, mental health and social and emotional well-being, which we also heard a little about earlier this evening, describing how we're monitoring and supporting students and staff, what professional development is occurring, and also how we're addressing trauma. And engagement and outreach, again, how we're finding those students who are unreachable, which we've heard as a theme throughout the past few months, and the tiered re-engagement strategies that we have once we identify a student who's disengaged. And not least, school nutrition, which we've recently learned will be able to continue as it was in the summer, and really describing in this plan how we're going to provide meals both during distance learning, but also in person once we return. And in the back of the plan, there's the section which requires us to detail the specific actions and programs that are being used to increase or improve services for unduplicated students. And then throughout the plan, there's 4 summary tables for the key actions that are associated with our in-person instruction, distance learning, pupil learning loss, and then a miscellaneous or other table where we actually show the projected expenditures for those actions. I would just note here that, again, as we said in the public hearing, in this particular plan, it includes those actions that are new and a result of the COVID context, but also some actions that predate the COVID context, but are still relevant to responding to COVID. So there's a blending of those 2 types of actions in this plan. Next slide, please. We brought this slide last board meeting, and just want to note here again that this summarizes by section those expenditures, and these central column are the highlights. Those are not comprehensive, and in the plan you'll see additional actions that are included in each of those total dollar amounts. And again, these, my apologies. Again, these dollar amounts are from the revised budget and are across multiple resources. Next slide, please. So on this slide, I'll take a moment to stop and just share some of the highlights of the revisions that were made. Chief Harris noted we did make some revisions prior to posting this final plan. We included the elementary and secondary sample schedules that were released just prior to us being able to finish this. We updated the school nutrition section. And again, the key update here is that all children 18 years and younger will continue to be eligible for meals regardless of their status, which was an important change from the previous version of the plan. We also described some of the disciplinary practices and the guidance that has been provided to sites. Also, we're able to detail some of the LGBTQ+ supports that were added recently in terms of description. We also additionally aligned some of the draft elements to the not yet released but drafted return to support and return to connect plans. We also added a description of the active screening processes and the closing criteria description for in-person instruction. And with regard to that latter component, that defines the circumstances under which a school that has reopened for in-person instruction may be considered for closure and return to distance learning based on the health situation. And that, of course, is based on current public health recommendations, which the district continues to monitor at the county and the state level. We also updated some of the information for students with disabilities in the supports for pupils with unique needs section. And we did revise that cover sheet language with which Principal Harris commented on, Chief Harris commented on earlier. Next slide, please. Also included in this item for adoption are the learning continuity and attendance plans for the district's dependent charter schools. And these include Bowling Green Elementary Charter School, George Washington Carver School of Arts and Science, New Joseph Bonheim Community Charter School, Sacramento New Technology High School, and the Met Sacramento High School. All schools, in addition to having these plans come to you as a board, will be submitted to the county and posted on their websites. Here again, for next steps, really want to cast everyone's eyes further and looking at November and June. Again, we've mentioned in the past that we see the LCA plan as a bridge to the LCAP process. This is a unique year in which we've had first a postponement, then an elimination of the 2021 LCAP, and we had new plans such as the operations written report and this LCA plan created. So here, as we now move back into the traditional timeline, we are looking forward to presenting a robust process over the year that would include the annual update you heard referenced earlier, as well as the next 3-year LCAP. So that 2021-22 LCAP would be for the next 3-year cycle that moves us beyond into the 23-24 year. Next slide, please. So lastly, we are recommending adoption of the SCUSD Learning Continuity and Attendance Plan, as well as the Learning Continuity and Attendance Plans for our dependent charter school. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fong. Do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, we do, Board President Ryan. We have 1 live comment and 5 written comments. And our first live comment is Elizabeth Guillen.
Good evening, board members and Superintendent Aguilar. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you, Liz.
This is Liz Guillen with Public Advocates, which joined a letter in coalition with the Black Parallel School Board, LULAC Sacramento Education Committee, and Sacramento ACT. We wanted to lift up language in the plan that is very clear in its statement that the contents of this plan include some elements that are still being discussed in negotiations with bargaining groups. 5 key elements are then listed: the amount of daily live instruction versus independent learning, access to recorded instructions, alignment of instruction to identified essential standards, documentation of services provided to students with disabilities, and implementation of the district's common assessments. This very clear statement in the plan puts parents, students, and community stakeholders on notice. There can be no reasonable expectations for accountability of what's in the plan. To say that something is a plan but is still in negotiations creates great uncertainty, something our community does not need. We request that the plan be revised to mark those actions and services that are uncertain as of its adoption, and that the district provide a regular status update at each board meeting and on its website and communications to parents and caregivers and students. All of us need this, but especially the most vulnerable in Sacramento: African American students, low-income students, English learners, students in foster care and experiencing homelessness, and students with exceptional needs. They should not be subjected to the uncertainty resulting from the failed negotiations of the district and its employee bargaining units. We will be requesting SCOE to recommend that changes be made to the plan, particularly noting and differentiating in the plan the actions and services that are real plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Guillen.
And I just want to make a correction. We have 4 written comments.
Okay. Please go ahead, Ms. Arellano.
Thank you. Our first comment is Alina Cervantes. Our children deserve a distance learning agreement in place now. A member of the SETA bargaining team publicly told our parent group, Parents United, to restore our schools that our sticking point was around recorded lessons being required versus based on teachers' professional opinion. With all due respect, we can balance basic safeguards for children with academic freedom, and most professional educators understand that. Even my 3rd grader understands this when I told her the issue. Her answers was, there should be some rules that everyone has to follow, so it's fair for kids, but also the teachers can be free to teach in their own style. Why can my 8-year-old understand this and some adults can't? In the meantime, we have teachers asking teens to record themselves doing exercises for PE and upload the videos. We have teachers giving children extra credit to upload selfies to social media websites, when all research indicates this is unsafe and developmentally inappropriate.
and also a violation of privacy because the teacher is asking this be done on a public account and that they state their name and grade. These are the professional judgments preventing children with special needs from getting services. And let's not forget the other sticking point this bargaining member pointed to: essential standards being required versus used as much as possible. We need an agreement now that guarantees all children their right to a high-quality education. We can't leave it up to chance, and shame on any party that is pushing for that. Carl Pinkston. The Community Priority Coalition recognizes that this is hard work, but firmly believes that it is harder for parents, caregivers that have to partner with the district to make this plan meaning. We are concerned about parents' complaints that amended IEPs are simply cut, paste of prior IEPs, and that an actual assessment is not taking place. We request that the district provide an update to the board on assessments for students with disabilities. Which assessments are being used and when will they be administered? Last, our student needs clear guidance on how the plan will address learning loss and instructional support. Thank you. Liana Sanchez. Teachers and families need support accessing the resources for adoption in this plan. Correspondence, including meetings, emails, texts, and phone calls, need quality interpretation. If it is available in English, it must be language accessible to our multilingual families. What is SCUSD protocol for accessing quality interpretation and translation? Other districts have clear protocol. San Juan Unified has a language line, and Natomas Unified has a language link. SCUSD needs to build its capacity and availability. Also, when will MOC have a minimum of 2 interpreters per language to facilitate meetings, such as DLAC? One of our interpreters had technology issues at our last meeting, and there was not a second interpreter to provide language accessibility. How can teachers participate in parent-teacher home visit? This service used to be restricted to particular school sites. Has this service been opened up to all sites across SCUSD? And our last comment is a joint public comment on behalf of the Coalition for Students with Disabilities by Angie Sutherland, Allison French-Tubo, Renee Webster Hawkins, Sarah Williams Kingsley, and Angel Garcia. On Tuesday, the entire Special Education Community Advisory Committee was finally presented with an overview of the district's learning continuity and attendance plan. Sadly, there was minimal explanation or discussion with input from parents on goals for students with disabilities. It was like checking a box on stakeholder engagement, even though we all would like the LCAP to robustly include students with disabilities. The presentation did not emphasize the importance of parent involvement for students with disabilities in the LCAP planning process. The presentation did not include the LCAP Parent Advisory Committee, or PAC, members who are also members of the CAC, which could have helped to give more context and relevance to the 50-plus parents that attended the meeting. The CAC membership was not asked to help in defining the priorities of the CAC for students in the LCAP plan or upcoming LCAP annual update. The CAC leaders stated that they provided input to the LCAP coordinator about the priorities of the CAC, but that list was not shared with the CAC general membership. The lack of transparency is troubling. As board members, please be aware that this plan lacks authentic engagement of mandated stakeholders and families of students with disabilities. Good news is, though, that parents are coming out in droves to attend recent virtual CAC meetings, and they need help. Director Bryant and CAO Bieda have shown a willingness to and desire to assist. Parents are calling for plans to be set in place to stop the chaos they are experiencing with distance learning. One of the major issues that the students who previously had one-to-one aides at school are not receiving the same
level of assistance via distance learning and struggle to engage in our access learning. A veteran CAC parent mentioned checking with non-public agencies that are willing to provide one-to-one aids for the district in students' homes to give them the services they have rights to. However, Director Bryant says it is a twofold problem. First, there is no contract with the union who represents the district employees who provide this level of service, SEIU, to resume in-person work. Second, since students served by those staff aren't being served, students who receive the same or similar service provided by the contractor, some of whom are willing to provide these services now, in the interest of equity, no one can receive the services from either district employees or from outside providers. It is unconscionable that because we lack a distance learning MOU, the result is that our students with disabilities are deliberately deprived of the services required by their IEP and federal law. Practically speaking, this leaves students and families in the gap in high crisis. Without the needed services, children are regressing educationally and emotionally. We don't know how many students and staff are affected by the issue, but in general, our impression is that the highest needs students are most affected. Students with disabilities need help now. Plans for assessments, both for purposes of progress monitoring for students with existing IEPs and for students whose families have requested evaluation for possible special education services, are unclear. How the district plans to meet its obligations to identify all possible students with disabilities via distance learning, also known as child find, are also unclear. Discussions on the distance learning MOU between SCTA and SCUSD included disagreements about assessments and services provided to students with disabilities, but it's unclear where the issues now stand. Additionally, the proposed MOUs are silent on how to conduct required comprehensive evaluations and develop transition plans for students approaching high school and graduation. The community needs clarification as soon as possible. Students' rights to a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment should not be on hold because our community is in the midst of a pandemic. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is still in effect. And that concludes the public comments under this item.
Thank you, Ms. Ariano. Do we have comments and questions from board members? Okay, while we wait to queue up our board members, I have some questions that I want to ask. So I am very concerned, and I think both the Black Pearl School Board Community Coalition and our Coalition for Students with Disabilities articulated some grave concerns about our ability to meet the needs of our special education students, one of our most vulnerable student populations in the district, in this time of distance learning. And so, my question really comes to, in the absence of an agreement and with some recognition that core sticking points included the willingness to honor the minutes of an IEP versus the general education classroom minutes, how are we going to ensure our compliance with the law and our moral imperative to meet the needs of this student population? It is very concerning to me to recognize that we are continuing to operate in a world where these student populations lose ground every week, that we fail to have an agreement and commitment to be able to honor the terms of their IEP. And I don't know which staff would like to take that question.
Well, President Ryan, I will answer, and then others can chime in. I am very concerned about our ability to comply with SB 98. Last week, we did communicate with the California Department of Education as much because it is important that we are complying with SB 98 and that we are meeting the needs of our students. I did have a short conversation with the Department of Education on Friday because we do want to make sure that we receive guidance given the importance of our submission of this plan by CDE, or that we have some information about any potential relief that might be given where we have evidence that we will not be able to meet and comply with SB 98, and I certainly will keep our board and our community informed of that.
Thank you. I also want to ask just one question about this point of being able to, with our special education service providers that are non-district, so non-public school employees, provide that one-to-one in-person aid instruction. I mean, I will tell you, having a child who has had an instructional aid in the classroom, the absence of that in the virtual learning environment is incredibly difficult. And I am worried that we will experience in our family an inability to see learning growth. But we have the resources to figure out ways to augment that. And the majority of our families in Sac City do not. And so recognizing those equity implications, what can we do with our non-public service providers to be able to provide that supplemental support for our special education students?
Superintendent, would you like me to try to help?
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Bailey.
Yes. I think a couple things, President Ryan. First and foremost, I share your worries and your concerns, as well as your advocacy. As you know, that I'm a mom of a student who would need that support, and I completely understand what our families are asking for and what that level of need is. It's very, very difficult to meet our students' needs in the home without that level of support. Here are some of the concerns, both with when we first consider an agency coming into a home, they do have some, and I don't know if we'd call them requirements, but there are some things that have to be met for them to come in the home regarding safety and other issues. We also know that not all of our families are willing to have other people coming into their home for safety reasons. And here's the piece that's going to continue to be difficult for me. And I know that, it's difficult also for superintendent and for all of us. Some of our students who have agency provision for the adult support, if that agency says, yes, we can come into the home, they determine that that home meets the needs and they can go in, then we can provide service there. But what if we can't meet the requirements of the agency for that home? Now, we inequitably have provided support in a home where they can, but in another home we can't. And what about all of our service provision for one-on-one Sac City employees? They would also have to agree to go into people's homes. It's really hard to see how equitably we can right now make sure that we can provide the one-on-one aid to every student who needs and deserves. It doesn't put us in a position where we put up our hands and say, there's no way to make this work. It's just continuing to be complicated to be able to make this work and to be able to make this work in a way that equitably serves all of our students. But we're continuing to seek solutions, President Ryan.
No, and I look forward to unpacking those solutions further, because I absolutely believe in an equitable solution. And I also believe that if we have an opportunity to serve hundreds of students versus the couple thousand that we would like, and we've missed that opportunity, what does it mean if we took a tiered intervention approach where the neediest are those prioritized first, as we're able to bring online the other students who also deserve and should have those supports? Other questions and comments from board members? Board Member Pritchett, and then Board Member Morowski.
Thank you, President Ryan, and thank you for bringing up those topics. I am curious. We know that being able to get aides into the homes of our students is going to be the best option. But I am curious if we have looked into a program that's very similar to the parent-teacher home visits, who have now kind of pivoted being home visits via online, kind of like what we're doing here, but one-on-ones. Have we done any of that?
So, Superintendent, I can support Member Pritchett's question too. So different than our spring distance learning, where we didn't really have great ways to bring our instructional assistant professionals into supporting in our online environment, we're better able to do that during this fall distance learning. So yes, we have opportunities where they can be supporting students both during their whole class sessions, during breakout sessions, and we also have times where they can support during one-on-one. So they all now have access to computers, and we can make sure that that happens for students. So that's a really great solution that we do have as an option for kids. Thank you for that question.
That's good to know. And then I just have a couple other things. I do have some concerns based on the public comments on this presentation and the public comments during regular public comment. And one of them, or two of them actually, are based on one comment by Alina Cervantes. She's had made a comment about the public social media accounts. And I'd like to ask, if we have not already done so, that we immediately start an investigation to find out what post their selfies on. As we know, if they're online, they're not safe on these public sites. And then also an investigate of the recordings of physical education courses that are being recorded. I'm sure that these are probably good intentions. But we hear all the time about information that's being stolen from people's computers, being hacked. We've seen some of our own classrooms being hacked through Zoom. And my worry is that the wrong people are going to get hold of this and they're going to do some not good things with it. And then lastly, in regard to during our public comment session, I just want to say that we need to listen to our students. We had many of them that reached out to us, and in the process of all of this, when I speak to our teachers in our area, I feel like they're being vilified in this process, and it's not fair for them. And we need to work together to be able to get this. Our kids are just depending on it, and I just hope that we're able to pull this together for their sake. I just think that in the long run, our kids are being hurt and our teachers are being hurt, and we're going to lose the best of our teachers. And those students that have the ability to be pulled out of our district will be. We heard it right during public comment.
Thank you, Board Member Pritchett. Board Member Morawski.
Thank you, and thanks again to staff for bringing this plan forward. I appreciate the district using these documents that are compliance driven in some cases to really expand on and be really transparent about what we're doing for our community and for our kids. And I think the stakeholder engagement was significant and authentic for the time period that it had to be done in. So I do hear the concerns from our CAC and our special ed community, and I think we probably could have done more there, and that conversation is by no means over. So I just appreciate that continued dialogue, and I think we need to listen and evaluate what we're doing to see if we measure up to the righteous expectations of the parents that communicated to us today. I think a couple things. One thing I'd like to see in a more clear way is some kind of monitoring of bringing back to the board how we are monitoring our delivery of special ed services. As we're rolling it out, as these IEPs are being modified, it's really hard to get a handle on what's happening, and I think we need a more robust plan and kind of reporting on how you're tracking it and how we're doing, so we can certainly follow up on that. On the mental health supports, I appreciated them being laid out in a lot of detail. I just wanted to go back to Board Member Shake's comment about students really paying attention to their peers and going to their peers for help. And I would just like to advocate for adding, peer support and peer training on how to support each other, because I see a lot of, wonderful resources, training for teachers, SEL curriculum, and so forth. But I think that peer piece and the student piece is something that we could put into tier 1. That would be really beneficial. And then finally, on the point about, that many of these really critical elements that are foundational to this plan have an asterisk around them because we don't have an agreement yet. That's really problematic. At the very least, we need to, as some of the public comments suggested, highlight those areas, throughout the plan, and make sure that our community knows, and just be transparent about the implications of that. We need to figure this out for our community as soon as possible. So again, thank you so much for all the work that went into this. And I guess a quick question: will this plan be final, or will there be actually changes to the plan as things develop?
Once approved, we are required to submit the plan to the county office. But CDE and the county have been clear that we can continue to revise the plan as meets our local needs. And we can post those revisions on our website. It is our plan. And it really is designed for communication with our community. So we can do that ongoing. And I'll note also that this plan will be part of what we report on in the LCAP annual update coming up in the future. So there will be a formalized follow-up to some components. We haven't seen that template yet, but that will also be part of the process.
Great. If you could just let us know, I don't know if you know now, what kind of what timeline, or how many times you think revisions will be made, or or how our community and the board would be notified of revisions.
And I do think, Mr. Fong, given how critical it is that we continue to lean into this idea that we can refine and improve this based on student needs and parent demands, that while I appreciate that it's part of the annual LCAP presentation, I actually would say I would hope that we would be bringing it back fairly regularly as we continue distance learning to the board meetings.
Thank you.
Do we have other questions or comments from board members? Okay, Board Member Garcia.
Yes, thank you, Board President. I also want to echo my colleagues' concerns on the plan. It needs to more clearly state that's the district's plan, but everything is subject to other agreements. So it just needs to be clear. That way it's transparent, it's clear to our parents in terms of realistic expectations. So I also want to echo the concerns about the, meeting the needs of students with exceptional needs. In particular, the processing of IEPs. I've heard from parents in terms of not being contacted by someone in the district, having a hard time connecting with a teacher, with a principal. And just what's the timeline on that, on processing those IEPs? And when I think about that, I think about the additional funds that all districts in the state of California, I think, virtually received in last year's state budget that was intended to go to special education. And I believe we took action last year to ensure that we cleared the backlog on IEPs, processing IEPs. And I'm just wondering if that process is in place that can support the processing of IEPs during the distance learning environment. So I don't know if somebody has an answer on that. And I have one more question.
I can share a bit. Those are really good questions, Member Garcia. I would say first and foremost, anything that we put in place to make sure that we can get our IEPs up to date last year. We still have those options available, but what's difficult right now, and I'll always be nothing but painfully honest, is that a lot of our IEPs need to be amended for this new space that we're in, because what we wrote before, even if it's something that we wrote in the spring, may not be completely meeting our students' needs right now, depending on that student. And so we absolutely need to honor if anybody on the IEP team, and especially always our parents, feel that we need to amend an IEP, we need to be ready to do that. And in so doing, that can take some additional time. So we know, and I know that that Director Bryant's on here and she could share some specific numbers, because we did have some compliance training for our team, both administrators and teachers, as well as other special education team members around compliance. And we shared the exact number of IEPs that from spring still need to be put forward and brought into compliance for a timeline perspective for our fall distance learning. So we do have some work to do there to make sure that all of our IEPs are first and foremost compliant, meeting student needs, and that we're meeting all of our timelines.
So just to follow up on that, is that being communicated to parents? They just haven't heard anything. So I'm concerned that while there's a lot of work happening at the district level, that is not being communicated to parents so that they at least know more or less when to expect that something is happening. So I want to leave you with that. And then I don't know if you want to respond, or I can move on to my next question.
Well, I'd love to respond. I'd love to respond both for the board and for our community that is joining us this evening, that all of our students who are receiving special education supports, they have a case manager. And that case manager absolutely should be reaching out, sharing timeline for IEP, and making sure that parents know what the next steps will be for holding those virtual IEP meetings. There is nothing holding us back from holding, just like we're doing right now, and meeting together for our IEPs. So our families should be hearing from their case managers. They absolutely should. And if they do not, they reach out to their teacher, they reach out to their principal, and continue to reach out so that we can help.
Thank you, Ms. Vieta. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Were you finishing?
No, I just never know who's frozen. When somebody freezes, I don't know if I'm frozen or if somebody I'm listening to is frozen. So I don't know if Member Garcia is frozen, but I thought she had another question.
I think she is off.
She's back. Is she back?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm having major issues today. So my last question is along Member Morawski's comments about sort of revisiting the plan and you know, as things continue to evolve. But I have a more specific question relating to the distance learning plan that's in place. I know I have read that other districts at some point sort of, you know, evaluate how things are going and then making some necessary adjustment, whether it's minutes, whether it's schedules, whatever that may be. I'm just wondering at what point does the district plan to assess how well the distance learning plan is working, and what adjustments might have to be made in order to just, you know, address those issues that may come up. So I don't know at what point you do that.
Well, thank you, Member Garcia. I know that it feels like it's been a long time, but we're still in our first full week of instruction. But it's a very good point. We are actually right now starting to begin to compile information related to attendance, as you know, also related to engagement, making sure that we have the ability to respond to the needs of our students as well as getting a better sense of the amount of time that our teachers are working with our students, both synchronously and asynchronously. I would be happy to bring back an item to the board in 2 weeks at our next board meeting to give you a better sense, and also come back to the board as we did prior to this board meeting with a presentation that provides an update to the board on things that matter. I also want to mention that we do have in place a draft set of new school year metrics, if you will, that our team has been working on, and we will also bring that to the board so that we all have some baseline information that we're all going to agree to monitor frequently as we bring back information to you and to our community about what we're learning about distance learning across the district.
Thank you. I think that would be appreciated. And I just want to thank staff for all the one behind this plan. I know it was a very short period of time where a lot of work had to happen. I work with a lot of education experts, and I know a lot of work went into developing a plan. It's very comprehensive, again, very lengthy, a lot of detail. So I did appreciate reading all that detail. I mean, it's a great start, but again, it's making sure that we highlight which areas are contingent upon other conversations. So thank you.
President Ryan, if I can just say one last thing on this side, echoing what Member Garcia just mentioned. I know that our team is too modest to say this to our board, but I will. Certainly a lot of areas for improvement. I try to always demonstrate that I demand for myself and for our staff that they operate with an improvement mindset. And so we have listened to the feedback. I've taken notes based on some of the public comments from some of our community members, but I do want to just make sure that the board is aware, again, because our team is too modest, that we received several emails from people across the state indicating to us that they had taken portions of our LCA plan and incorporated them into their own plans. And again, I just want to thank the staff for all of that hard work that Member Garcia just mentioned. I know that they wouldn't say that themselves, but I did want to say that on their behalf so that the board is aware.
Thank you, Superintendent, and we want to thank the team for everything you're doing in this unprecedented situation. I don't think we have any other questions on this item. This is an action item. Do we have a motion and a second?
Move it.
Second.
Second.
Student preferential vote?
Aye.
Roll call vote, Superintendent?
Member Ryan?
Aye.
Member Pritchett?
Aye.
Member Minnick?
Aye.
Member Morawski?
Aye.
Member Garcia?
Aye.
Member Vang?
Yes.
Member Wu?
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. Moving on to item 9.3, approve the 2019-2020 year-end financial unedited actuals, which will be presented by Rose Ramos.
Good evening, President Ryan, board members, superintendent, and members of the public. Tonight, we are presenting to you, or I am presenting to you, the 2019 unaudited financial statement, which is equivalent of an organization's year-end financial statements. And they're referred to as unaudited because, of course, our auditors have not yet audited this year, and this will happen throughout the course of the next few months. So next slide, please. So the agenda for this evening is we'll go over the numbers of the unaudited actuals, and we'll compare them to the last time you saw estimated actuals for this particular year that we just closed, which was at the June 25th board meeting of this year, when you took action to adopt the budget for the 2021 fiscal year. And then we'll move into showing you the multi-year projections with the updated beginning balances from the unaudited actuals. And we'll go into a Q&A, and then the next budget report, and then finally into approval. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick slide on the unaudited actuals, a summary version compared to the estimated actuals, which you saw back in June, just to kind of point out those differences. And you'll see, of course, that there were some differences in most of the categories because estimated actuals were prepared right around May, and we had not, of course, closed out the year. So we had roughly about 6 weeks of information that we still had to record, and then there's additional information that trickles in throughout July that gets accrued to the closing year. So there are always going to be differences, of course, because between the estimated actuals and the unaudited, because of the timing. And so we're going to go into more details in the future slides, but just wanted to kind of give you a snapshot of the differences between both of these financial statements. So in the next slide, here are the highlighted differences. So we're focusing right now on the unrestricted changes, and we'll go into the restricted later because the unrestricted is what we really want to focus on, since this is really what funds our 2%. This is what we really strive to build up our reserves and to eliminate our deficit. So unaudited actuals, our unrestricted ending balance for 1920, we ended up with 84.7 million. At estimated actuals, we were projecting this number to be 63.8 or 64. So there's a difference, obviously, of 20.9 million. And the differences are in these two categories, revenues and expenses, so it's not all just expenses. For the unaudited actuals, we ended up with about $1.5 million more than we were projecting at estimated actuals, and we'll go into those details shortly. And then on the expense side, we ended up coming in under what we were projecting to spend by about 19.4. So next slide, please. And so we're going to start to dive into the details, but just wanted to kind of put this all in perspective and just to give you an idea percentage-wise, what does this mean to our budget? So again, focusing on unrestricted, we isolated restricted from unrestricted. So if we look at the budget overall and we say, okay, well, how much did we really spend compared to estimated actuals? For unrestricted, that was 96%, which is not too bad considering it was a very unusual year. We had school closures. So the percent that was remaining to be spent on the unrestricted side was 4%. And this is assuming we would have spent 100% based on what we were
President Ryan, can you hear me? Yeah, I believe.
I can. Did we lose Rose?
I think Ms. Ramos may have frozen here. Ms. Ramos, if you can hear us, we're not able to hear you.
Perhaps what we could do is we could have Ms. Ramos go on audio only to limit her bandwidth if she wants to continue the presentation that way.
I think she was.
She was on video.
She was on video and audio.
Sorry about that. I got kicked off. My internet is very unstable also.
Yeah, Ms. Ramos, we were saying, why don't you go ahead and go on audio only since we have the slide deck that we can reference?
Sure, I will do that. Alrighty. Okay, so here, so again, just to recap, so the percent remaining to be spent on restricted was about 11%. Now, when you look at how many school days we closed out of the 180 instructional days, it was 62. That was a lot. That comes out to about 34%. And so kind of put that in perspective with our spending, not that they should match precisely, but nonetheless, in the last few months of a school year, we are seeing quite a bit of activity when it comes to spending, especially in terms of activities for students, whether it's field trips, we have professional development that happens during the spring. And then due to the climate, we also see quite a bit of use when it comes to our facility side of the house, air conditioning, water usage, etc. So if we can go on to the next slide, you'll see that. We're going to take you, not line by line, but pretty much major categories. So on the unrestricted side, the revenue, we said that we came in about 1.5 million, 1.4 million above, not a big change. And this was, the first category was $370,000, and this is due to the year-end adjustments that happened. LCFF is based on our ADA, and so about right around this time when we close the books, we have already prepared our P2 report, which is our second annual report that captures actual attendance. And so there's always going to be adjustments because, you know, our attendance changes, our enrollment changes, and then there's also the true-up that happens with some of the property taxes that trickle in throughout the year. So not a big deal there. And then for MA earnings, they came in a little bit above projected, and MA is our Medi-Cal administrative activities, which are the unrestricted side of Medi-Cal. This is for promoting access to Medi-Cal and connecting our families with health services. So about $417,000 there. And then minor adjustments for some of our other small accounts like lottery, it was about a negative $23,000. And then finally, our interest, we did see a little bit of an uptick in that, and that was because our spending did slow down quite a bit. We weren't drawing down as many funds. And then our charter oversight fee also gets trued up at the end of the year because that is also built on, based on LCFF, a 1% fee there. So 1.4 million there increase. So our next slide. Now here we go into the expenses on the unrestricted side. And as I mentioned earlier, we were required to close schools because of COVID-19, of course. And so this is the result in some of these spending categories. We did see some vacancies. The first line item is about 3.8 million in certificated vacancies. And the reason for that is because we did have vacancies that we intended to fill. These are authorized positions that are needed in our school sites and throughout the district. But because of the closures, we pretty much slowed that down. We weren't sure, you know, should we move forward? What's going to happen? We were in a waiting mode here. And so it was about 3.5 for teachers, and that's a variety of teachers, not just classrooms. These also include some of your supplemental teachers, your PE teachers, so it's in a variety of categories. And then there was another 300,000 that included other types of certificated salaries, which include like your coordinators, some of your admin staff here at the central office. So it's not just teachers when we're talking certificated. And then of course, about 1.2 million in temporary positions that we just, you know, did not use them because of the closures. And under the classified vacancies, we did see about 1.4 in lower spending, and the majority of this was bus drivers, about $1 million there. And again, the same reason here, we slowed down that hiring. There's a couple things with bus drivers though. Even if we were not in a COVID environment, it's very common in school districts to see higher vacancy rates in your bus drivers. It's very difficult to recruit for those positions because of the hours. They're just not full-time jobs always. And you know, of course, you know, the pay isn't as competitive as another field. And so not uncommon, but this year we did see a quite bigger savings because our drivers were not out on field trips or athletic events. And so there was not as much of a need to hurry up and backfill for some of these positions. And then the other 300,000 include a variety of positions, right? Would be your admin, your noon duty, clerical staff, and then 100,000 for temporary positions. And then with those, of course, go the corresponding benefits that are budgeted for all of these positions, which is about 2.9. I mean, what's interesting about the benefits is you'll see that benefits are quite expensive. They almost exceed, you know, the cost of the vacancies for classified alone. And that's just because of our STRS and PERS, the higher rates we're paying there, and of course, because of health benefits. So next slide, please. And here's some additional unrestricted expense line items. We saw a reduction in our equipment and supplies of about 1.5 million. And these are a variety of things. It's like office supplies, and also some of our transportation supplies, such as oil, tires, fuel, parts for some of our bus repairs. We were just not utilizing those items either during those last 4 months of the school year. So it was natural that we were going to see a savings. And then we had about 3.4 in utilities. Transportation, this whole category includes utilities, transportation for field trips, fees, telecommunications, equipment rentals, postage, and travel. What was interesting is we started to analyze some of these accounts. In our utilities account alone, we saw a savings of about $700,000 in water, in our water usage. And that's because in the spring you have more watering, and additionally, you know, as someone pointed out to us, you don't have as many users using things like the facilities, your restroom, so forth and so forth. So, you know, lots of less water usage there. And then we had a small savings in our equipment and equipment replacement of about $130,000. And then our $235,000, this is for the additional expense for our county office operated programs like our community day schools, and we do a true up at the end of the year, not unusual there. And then, of course, our indirect cost was lower because we spent less in the restricted funds. So, of course, we were not going to, you know, we were going to see a decline in the amount of indirect costs that we could charge. And then the final category is that we did see lower contributions to our restricted programs. For special ed, that was $5.7 million. And for our routine restricted maintenance, that was $1.5 million. And for routine restricted maintenance, what happened here is the same thing, is that our facility projects came to a halt when COVID hit. And so it was natural that this category was also going to see a reduction in activities. And for special ed, it was a variety of services and items that were just not, you know, that all came to a halt during the COVID crisis in the early months. And the next slide, we just have a category here on the restricted, and just to explain that for category resources, as I mentioned earlier, we have to spend the money in order to recognize that revenue. And so because the spending was slowed down so much because of COVID, and it made it very difficult to spend very restricted dollars, we underspent. And so there was about 11.6 in revenue that was not recognized due to a decrease in expenditures. But please know that this revenue will be carried forward into the new year, and those expenses will come forward as well. So you'll see an uptick in the restricted side in terms of expenses and in terms of revenue. And now you're saying, well, this does not quite match. You have 27 million in underspent expenses and then 11.6 being carried forward. The difference here is due to the contribution. As you may recall in the previous slide, we did have that contribution that was lower by 7 million. So that accounts for part of that 27. In addition to that, our restricted side also started with a beginning balance of about 8 million. So there were some other resources that do support that 27 million, not just the revenue that was supposed to be earned in 1920. So again, as we bring forward to you the revised budget, you will see an increase on the restricted side, and that is a big chunk of that has to do with this carryover. So next slide, please. And so now what we've done for you is we took the last multi-year projection that we shared with you all, and that was at the August 20th board meeting, where we brought to you some revisions to the budget. And we imposed on here the new beginning fund balance from the unaudited actuals, just to say, okay, if we run now our new beginning fund balance, not changing anything else, what does that mean for our ending fund balance? So of course it's going to improve it, right? Because we just explained that we had an improvement of 20 million in our ending fund balance. So it does improve it. But based on these projections, not changing the budget, this is before the budget revisions we're going to bring in a couple of weeks to you, you still see that, you know, we're still, you know, at a negative ending fund balance. Our deficit has not been eliminated. And so so these funds that we didn't spend are not necessarily recurring funds. These are one-time dollars because of this situation. And we know that, however, since we did not start school with on-site instruction, that we also have to go back and relook at our budget and rebench some things, because now we know that, okay, well, we didn't start on time, so we can expect to see some type of similar savings that we experienced in the spring. To what degree? We don't know, because we don't know when we're going to be given the authority to reopen up. But what we've been hearing, that it doesn't look like it's going to happen within the next month. Maybe so, maybe not. So we're going to plan to possibly save similar categories for the next few months. And so the budget that we're going to be bringing forth to you on October 1st will be revised to reflect some projected savings, one-time savings, and some possibly ongoing savings as well. And I'll go into that in a little bit. So having said that, that will change your deficit, the deficit for the district, of course, because we are going to reduce the expenses for 2021. So that'll improve it, provide, assuming that, your revenue doesn't decline drastically, or we don't have any other surprises in our expenses that kind of, put a negative spin on that. And then it will again improve your ending fund balance. And as we've mentioned before, our budgets are not, fixed budgets. They're moving targets, and we have to make adjustments and be flexible and respond to what's going on in our environment and at the state level. Our revenue is dictated by the state, and then our expenses are dictated by the needs of the district. So we just have to continuously update and monitor and bring to you the latest budget revisions. And sometimes these swings look very drastic and can be quite a little alarming at times. But this is the reality of of the information that the district has, and we're just bringing to you what the impact has on our budget. So the next slide will okay. This is what we've been learning from our trend analysis, because we've been hearing a lot about our vacancy savings, and that the district has many vacancies that possibly they're positions that may not be needed. That's not necessarily the case. What happens in districts is that when we start a fiscal year, we're authorized for an X number of positions. And it is pretty rare that you're going to start the fiscal year with 100% of those positions filled, and that you're going to end the year with 100% of those positions spent down. There's going to be variations, whether it's because people leave throughout the year unexpectedly, or because new positions are created and they just don't get filled as quick enough for whatever reason, or because they're hard to fill positions. We do have that, like many districts, and I've worked in a few districts, and there's the two categories where you do have the hard to fill positions, which are in special ed and transportation. Not unusual at all. And our district is no different in that respect. And so there's a couple of ways that districts handle vacancy analysis and how they plan for them in their budget. Some districts do what's called a true-up, that at each interim reporting period, and let's just take, for example, first interim, that ends as of October 31st. Districts will say, okay, as of October 31st, we had, so X number of vacancies, and at this point in time, that translates into about $500,000 in unused resources. And so a district will go ahead and liquidate that $500,000, put it back into the appropriate categories, or it becomes part of the ending fund balance. Other districts use a different type of vacancy analysis, where they analyze their vacancy rates for the last few years and for the current year at different intervals in time, and come up with a percentage that is applied to their budget from the beginning, so that you immediately recognize or allow for a vacancy rate. And you don't budget for those salaries, you budget for the FTE. They are definitely in your position control, but you immediately recognize the savings. Now, this is a very good technique. They're both, used in various districts. The second technique requires a little bit more monitoring and updating at each interval, because you have to make sure that, that rate still holds and that there hasn't been anything that will change that rate. Otherwise, you can be caught a little short if it's not appropriately updated. So that's the difference between the two. They're both great ways to approach this. It just depends on the district. So we are going to start looking, and our staff has been doing that now, is looking at their vacancy trend analysis to come up with a vacancy rate. But again, I just need to emphasize that this is something that's not a number that's plugged in and kind of you walk away from it all year long. You do need to come back and monitor this and update it appropriately. So the next slide this is some analysis that staff just completed, looking at our vacancy trend analysis for just the unrestricted general fund. But before I go into these numbers, I just want to explain this does not represent 100% of our vacancies. What I did not share in the previous slide is that when you do this trend analysis, you're not automatically including all vacancies in the rate that you're going to come up with. You're only selecting those categories that tend to have a vacancy on a recurring basis. because there's going to be other vacancies and other positions. Let's just, say, for example, the director of budget. And that's not a position that, you're going to put into this analysis because it's not one that would typically stay vacant for a long period of time, like your transportation, like your bus drivers. Those you do tend to see from year to year. So, okay, having said that, so staff went back and started to look at this analysis for this past year, since this is the year we just closed. We looked at the period, first interim ended October, and then second interim ends in January, and then our third in April. So we looked at the number of vacancies for the categories that typically see vacancies, and we calculated the FTE, and then as a percentage of the total authorized FTE for those categories. So just taking the certificated at October 31st, we had 32.85 vacant FTE vacancies in the particular categories, and they represent 2.17% of those that are authorized. I hope that makes sense, and I'll check for clarity. And so you check again, mid-year, you check again at the end of the year, and you can start to see that, it does start to decline, meaning that there is a concerted effort and there is a plan to fill these positions. But it just, there's a whole variety of reasons why that does not happen. And you do the same thing with your classified. Now, your classified tends to look a little higher because we just have, more bus drivers in these categories, and there's more noon duty aides in these categories, and there's more clerical support staff and more instructional aides in these categories. Those are also other positions that don't, we typically do see some ongoing vacancies there. So this is the analysis you do, and then you come up with an average, and then you use that in your budget to plan and to budget for a vacancy that gets updated. And you see how you were updating throughout the year so that we are not always using the same fixed number. And so, like I said, it requires that monitoring. And then we also have to make sure that because these are positions that the district does intend to fill, so that means that there's work to be done under each of these categories. We then have to make sure that we're budgeting appropriately for our substitutes or our temporaries that are going to backfill for this work. So it's a pretty involved analysis and monitoring, but it is helpful, and it is closer in making your budget just a little bit tighter. But again, these are not necessarily ongoing savings. They just really reflect the savings that you should expect to see from year to year, and it does provide a little bit more transparency and showing the public, okay, this is how we are managing our vacancies right now. They're not simply just positions that we do not need. They're just, it's just part of the environment. And then again, you have to make sure that you're taking into consideration external factors that are going on in your community that may not be, mentioned here or caught in your trend analysis, like if you have a neighboring district that is experiencing declining enrollment, and what kind of layoffs are they going to be planning in their budget. So we just have to kind of be cognizant of those things, or unemployment in our area. Is that going to have an impact then on new applications for some of our vacancies, and just not just relying on one fixed number for this rate. And so we'll bring this information to you, and we will be sharing this with you in our proposed revised budget, and just to share with you what that would look like for the district for consideration and going forward, and see how that works out. And the next slide, please. So our next steps are that, as I just mentioned, that we're going to be bringing the 2021 proposed revised budget with additional expenditure reductions. Some are going to be one-time, as I mentioned, like mostly our operating costs, and some may be ongoing, this temporary ongoing, this vacancy trend. And then, of course, we're always continuing to try to identify solutions, because we know we still have to address our fiscal solvency issue and address that deficit. And then I'm just going to spend a few minutes on the cash flow, because within the board packet, the next slide, please, is an updated cash flow in the consent agenda. So our cash flow did change, and it changed for these reasons. The first one is because revenue that we should have received in 1920, we did not. We're going to receive it or recognize it in 2021 because of the lower spending levels in 1920, and that's just a cash flow issue. Now, the other two are surprises to all of us, because we had been sharing with you all along that the federal government typically reimburses their fund allocations on, after the fact, several months late. But to our surprise, and many of our surprises, we did get advance funding. One particular category that we're very pleased with is this number 2 here is the Corona Relief Learning Loss Mitigation Funds. This is the big chunk that we're getting for $34 million that has to be spent down by December 30th. And we were very concerned because, of course, we want to use these funds. We have many needs, but we also have to be mindful of cash flow because our cash flow is quite delicate. But now that we've received these monies, that kind of puts a whole different picture on the situation and it allows us to really plan for this and be able to utilize these funds by the deadline, assuming that the deadline holds. So that was a very pleasant surprise. So this, of course, did have a positive impact on cash flow. And then the third category was we did receive a portion, about 30% of the ESSER funds. This is the very first federal relief funds that we were awarded back in March. We were awarded $15.8 million, and we received about $4 million of this, which is great. And again, we're very pleased with that. So this had a positive spin on cash. So it did improve our cash position. If you can move to the next slide, please. And so when we reported to you last, we did share that we were projecting to have cash challenges starting in February of 2021. And that now with our new, because of the the slowdown in our spending and because of these two, infusions of cash from the federal government, it's pushed out our cash flow challenges to May of 2021. Didn't resolve it, of course, but nonetheless, this is giving us additional time to find a solution and to, possibly pursue other opportunities, which I'm going to go into. Next slide, please. So this is what we plan to do. We intend to pursue to address our cash flow issues. As we've shared with you, we will pursue all short-term internal and external borrowings and options. And that means, within our existing funds and also within any state trans that are available. We did put our application in for the statewide tran. Whether we qualify or not is another matter, but nonetheless, we are going to pursue everything that is available to us to avoid having to take out a state loan. And then secondly, we are definitely going to apply for that state apportionment deferral. Waiver deferral, I'm sorry, we forgot the word waiver in here. But we will apply for that waiver and so that we can avoid, again, the state loan. And then our next slide is, okay, we're there. So that is in a nutshell, our unaudited actual, a lot of information, I recognize that. So please, whatever questions you have, I will do my best to answer.
Before we take questions, we're going to take public comment on this item.
We have 2 written comments for this item. The first comment is from Allison French-Tubo. I'm confident that Rose Ramos and board members such as Lisa Morawski will provide an intelligent and meaningful presentation and discussion on these unaudited actuals to help us understand the difference between expenses delayed by COVID-19 versus expenses truly decreased and changes in amounts and timing of revenue streams. From the comments I see in various public formats, I know one piece many of us need help understanding is why it is that the cash flow projection now shows going into the red in May 2021 instead of February 2021. Is not bad news, but still not a happy story. So many of us seem to struggle with comprehending that continually drawing down on reserves is not sustainable. Another question that immediately comes to mind reading this is, why are the benefits not broken out by classified and certificated as the salaries are? Better yet, why are salaries and benefits not broken out by bargaining unit? Next comment is by David Fisher, President of the Sacramento City Teachers Association. It is a joint comment. Good evening. I'm David Fisher, the President of the Sacramento City Teachers Association. In the immortal words of Yogi Berra, this feels like deja vu all over again. According to the district's recently released unaudited actuals,
SEUSD ended 2019-20 with a surplus of $22,719,265. Let's call it $23 million. In July 2019, SEUSD projected to end 2019-2020 with a $12.3 million deficit. Even as late as May 2020, SEUSD projected a deficit of $6.5 million. In short, the district was off on its projections somewhere between 29 and 36 million. Just like last year when the district projected a 35 million deficit and then broke even. The magic number with this leadership team appears to be take the district's projection, add approximately 35 million to it, and you will arrive at the district's actual financial performance. But let's take a deeper look into the projections for this current fiscal year, 2020-21. In 2019-2020, SEUSD spent $530,835,167. In 2020-21, the district claims it will spend $631,390,632, an increase of $101 million. To repeat, an increase of $101 million. And where will that increased spending occur? According to the district, in 2019-2020, SEUSD spent $11.1 million on books and supplies. In previous board meetings, Chief Business Officer Rose Ramos informed us that the district typically uses this line item as a placeholder which contains otherwise unbudgeted spending. Some would say this is where the district tries to hide dollars that could be used to improve services to today's students. But in 2020-2021, the district takes this to a whole new level. The district has budgeted $73.3 million for books and supplies, an increase of $62 million or 558%. To repeat, an increase of 558%. Are we really to believe that the district intends to spend $73.3 million on books and supplies in 2020-21 or $1,833 per student? Enough to buy every Sac City student 6 Chromebooks? Moreover, the district's questionable budgeting includes ending this school year with a $40.4 million deficit. Applying the $35 million annual underestimation factor, that means that it is much more likely that the district will end 2021, 2020, and 21 with a $5 million deficit. But based on our analysis of the budget, the district's projections will be even more wildly inaccurate. In fact, if the district spent the same on books and supplies in 2020-21 as it did in 2019-20, the district would have another $23 million surplus. And this does not take into account decreased spending if distance learning continues or increased revenue based on federal legislation that is currently being negotiated in Washington, D.C. In fact, a more accurate way to describe SEUSD's financial performance over the last 8 years is not that the district has a structural deficit, but rather that the district has a structural surplus. On Thursday, September 17th, as we sit here today, the district has a reserve fund of $93 million, the highest in SEUSD history. The state minimum is 2%, or roughly $11 million. The district's reserve fund percentage is 17%. Unfortunately, Sacramento County Office of Education Superintendent Dave Gordon is blissfully unaware of the district's financial performance. He continues to talk about deficit spending and insolvency as if he hasn't taken the time to review the district's unaudited actuals. Despite having his own financial advisor directly involved in developing the SEUSD budget and evaluating its financial performance, Mr. Gordon's oversight has done nothing to provide more prudent fiscal management over the district's finances. In fact, it was on Dave Gordon's watch with his hand-selected fiscal advisor in place that SEUSD failed to count 5 schools in 2019, resulting in a $24 million budgeting mistake. On Dave Gordon's watch since August 2018, he and the SEUSD administrators and the school board have misled the community that the district was on the brink of insolvency.
And yet, here we are with the district sitting on the largest reserve fund in its history. Dave Gordon and SCUSD said that district was about to run out of money and would have a $35 million deficit in 2018 and 2019. The district broke even. Dave Gordon and SCUSD said that the district was about to run out of money and would have $12.3 million deficit in 2019-20. The district had a $23 million surplus. Dave Gordon and SCUSD now say that the district is about to run out of money and will have a $40 million deficit in 2020-2021. Those are the two public comments.
Thank you. Do we have board member comments or questions on this item? We have time for 2 minutes each, or 2 questions each. Okay, board member Morawski.
I don't know if I can do 2 questions, but I will try. Yes.
Followed by board member Garcia.
I feel like there's a lot to unpack with this financial update. So I appreciate it being laid out so clearly. Rose, Ms. Ramos, I think, I guess I'll make an observation first that, you know, we're in an unprecedented global pandemic. I know that's kind of like stating the obvious, but to think that we could close our schools for, you know, a third of the year and not see a major change to our spending is, you know, is just absurd. So, you know, I am glad that we were able to see this kind of fiscal silver lining from the horrible situation that we are in. But what it really means is these are millions and millions of dollars that we did not invest in our children over these last few months. Millions of dollars in services, in opportunities, in field trips, in sports, and everything. So, I mean, I think we need to just step back and reckon with that a little bit. That, you know, we may have helped the deficit inadvertently by not being able to do the things that we wanted to do for children, but we have created a deficit for our kids, and we need to account for that in what they will need to catch up and to make them whole. So I think that's kind of just the overall thing that makes me really sad. Like, 5.7 million in reduction in special ed services, you know, how much of that was actually a substantive reduction because kids were not getting the services that they need? You know, that's it's a horrible thing. But it is, you know, it is the numbers look better for our cash flow, so that's good. I do want to thank you, Ms. Ramos, very much for digging into the vacancy trend and looking at that. I think that's going to be a really important way we can tighten our budget and just budget, you know, as transparently as we can. And I like your approach and look forward to seeing that in the 2021 update that we'll get soon. I did have a question about the revenues in slide 10. I don't know if you can pull the slides up again, but, you know, because partially our deficits are a function of, you know, differences between spending and revenues, right? And our expenditures are not jumping around quite as much, although the 2021, like you said, will probably come down somewhat since we're still not investing in our children the way we really need to be. But I was curious about the total revenues on the 2021, 22, and the next year.
Sure. And the decline here is primarily on the restricted side, if that's what the question is, like, why are we declining? Well, in 2021, remember, this is when we got the large amount of CARES funds. So you're seeing here the 40 million in 2021 plus the 15.8. And yeah, And then we're still recognizing some of our SIG money, and so in 21 we start to taper off with that. We know that SIG got extended, so we are planning to carry some of that into 21, 22, and Title I as well, because we weren't able to spend it all down. And so the expectation is that by the end of 2022, we would have spent that down. So what you're seeing in 22, 23 is no more SIG money, using up most of our Title I carryover that we were allowed to carry over for an extra year, and then no more CARES federal money.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. So from a kind of, I think there are a lot of narratives that go on, about Sac City's budget in particular. I don't know any other school district that things are scrutinized at such a level. But because they are, I think we just want to be sure that we're transparent and we are telling an accurate story about why the budget looks the way it looks, right? So the story, I think, is we have a structural imbalance between revenues and expenditures. Kind of in a normal, just pretend COVID never happened. We'd be sort of going along with this differential. And maybe it's a little smaller because we have, we're recognizing those vacancy savings and kind of shoring up things, right? So that's a good thing. So maybe that gap shrinks a little bit. But we're going along, and that gap's still there. So COVID just, reduces the expenditures, and for a temporary period of time, as we're doing less for our kids, as our schools are closed, it's helping the budget because we're just not spending as much. But when we go back to school, when we open up again, we will probably, if we're still dealing with COVID, like we probably will be for the next, 2 years maybe, we will probably be doing as much and maybe more, like depending, I don't know, maybe we still won't be able to do certain things, but I just think we need to recognize, and just help our community understand kind of, this is the story, this is a temporary blip, and it'll go on for a while, it'll affect 2021 as well, so we'll see some reductions in expenditures for the next budget update. That's just normal. That's what we expect because we know more about what happened last year or didn't. So I just, it's not much of a question, but I just really think that we need to make sure that people understand the story. So I don't know if you have anything to add, Ms. Ramos, about kind of what the overall story of the budget is.
No, I think you framed it pretty well, Member Borowski. Yeah, this was just an unusual time, and so we, and again, and thank you for sharing that. The budget is going to undergo various changes because when we come back to you in 2 weeks, you'll see another revision. And so again, not to alarm anyone, but this is perfectly normal, and this is what we should be doing. Our budget should not be just a fixed thing, but it should be adjusting. It should be responding to whatever information we have. And now we have a little bit of trend analysis for when schools are closed. And so we need to bring that back to you, and we need to update our budget to reflect that.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Ramos. Ms. Garcia, Board Member Garcia.
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to thank you, Rose, for giving us a very detailed overview of where we're at and why we're here. I can say in working with districts, this is something that's happening in districts throughout the state where they're seeing a surplus. And it's a one-time, obviously, because services were not rendered. And unfortunately, budgets are looking better on a one-time basis. And unfortunately, at the expense of our students, because learning did not happen. So that's the sad reality. And in the case of Sacramento, that is definitely helping our cash flow problems. And again, it's certainly at the expense of students not getting what they need, especially our neediest students. So I just also wanted to caution that this is a blip and not a trend, and we just need to keep that in mind. And that when hopefully education or learning happens on site, even in a blended learning environment, that the acceleration of learning, the catch up happens with a very robust support system, teachers and anybody that needs to be available so that students can catch up as quickly as possible. So certainly the expenditure side, I expect for it to be higher than maybe even we anticipate at this time. I did have a question relative, a couple of questions. So we did hear about the huge balance in the textbooks line item, textbooks in materials. And it's something we've heard before. And I've asked this question before. And I do know that this is, I don't know if sounds like a common practice either here in the district or in other districts, that it's kind of like the parking where you park the money until you figure out where it's going to go. So my question is, will we see where these dollars are going to go by October 1st when we get the revision for the next, for 2020-21 budget?
The items that are there in your books and supplies, if we're talking about that $73 million that was referenced, we got to remember that $73 million includes your restricted category, not just your unrestricted. And if we pull them apart and look at just your unrestricted, it's only $12 million for unrestricted. So the remaining that's sitting in the restricted side, those funds have to be spent a certain way. So there might be some funds in there that can be moved around with permission of the grantor, but right now the budget is not showing your carryover. So what you're referring to maybe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Member Garcia, but when we park money in or funds in the 4,000s in your textbooks and supplies, that's after we post carryover typically, funds that have been brought over from the prior year, until our sites and our departments have an opportunity to determine how they're going to spend that money, because they may have to update their school site plans, they may have to discuss it with their constituents, and they really don't know what that carryover is going to look like yet until after we close the books and all their liabilities are accounted for. So in October, you'll see some, and when we bring the revised budget, you're not going to see it spread out yet, but you may see that supply line item increase. Right now, it's looking as large as it does because the majority of items that are funding that's sitting in the restricted supply line item is the CARES funds. Remember, we're having to book about almost $60 million in CARES money. So it did bring that line item up quite a bit until we decide if we're going to spend some of it in services or some of it on personnel. But right now, we have the bulk of it, not all of it, but a good chunk of it there at this point in time. So to answer your question, by October, typically not for carryover. It's not spread out yet. It should show up by first interim. That's when you generally have your carryover already allocated to specific line items other than the 4,000, or maybe a school site may decide to leave it all there. But yeah, that's the timeline.
We'll continue to see this amount fluctuate as we get revisions and you get the school site, the feedback loop from school site. So
that's correct.
Okay. That was my only question. Board Member Morawski asked some of the questions I had. So I appreciate again all the hard work that goes behind all of this, and essentially just caution that this is a blip and not a trend, and it does help our cash flow problems, but our structural deficit is still there, and our deficit spending is still happening, and we're just buying 2 months. So we're certainly not out of the woods. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Morawski. Do we have any other questions on this item? Board Member Pritchett.
Thank you, President Ryan. I have just a couple questions. Rose, on slide 14, where under your cash flow portion, you have the 3 different variances of just regular revenue, the federal corona relief dollars, and then the federal is it ESSER funds. Can you tell me for number 2 and number 3, are there restrictions of what can be purchased and what that money can be used for?
Yes, I can. Member Pritchett, they are restricted and they're recorded in the restricted side. They can be used to for learning loss. The second one, item number 2, is for learning loss mitigation funds. Anything to close or to address the learning loss that happened as a result of the closures. So it can be a variety of services. Anything from, of course, anything associated with distance learning, additional support. It's also utilized to provide professional development, to make sure the school environments are safe for students when they come back, whether it's putting up barriers, and also mitigating the actual spread of the virus on campuses. And there's a whole list of those items, and I can certainly make that available to you. And number 3 is pretty much falls in the same category as the first one. The category number 3 was just referred to as ESSER because the allocation method for those funds utilized the same allocation that we used for Title I. And so that's how they came up with the formula to allocate us a percentage of our allocation. And the difference also between them is that with the ESSER funds, we also have to provide comparable services to students who are attending private schools. So we've had that number calculated, and we're monitoring that very closely. But I can certainly provide more detailed information for you on, all the specific categories that are listed. And as a matter of fact, we just submitted our first expenditure report for use of these funds. It was due this past Monday. Staff was working on that, and they have the different categories where we're having to, record and track exactly what we're spending on and what, which part of the grant it fulfilled or the award it fulfilled.
Can program, gosh, I don't know what's going on here. Getting some feedback. Can learning programs that school sites are requesting that have been approved by the district be paid for out of those funds?
I'm sorry, Member Pritchett, I didn't quite hear your.
Oh, can learning programs that have been approved by the district be purchased out of those funds?
Learning programs, if it's related to mitigating learning loss, it should fall under that category. Without knowing the specific details, I'm not really able to.
I'll reach out to you about that one. My last question for you was on slide 16. You had talked about the waiver, and I know that we had mentioned earlier about the Dave Gordon was quoted on Cap Morning Radio about if we don't come up with an agreement with distance learning, then we're at risk of not getting the waiver. Can you tell me how that will affect us?
If we don't do, yeah, I'm sorry, you were cutting in and out. I didn't quite.
Sorry, I think my internet's choppy too. Yeah. Can the rest of you guys hear me?
I think you were saying, Christina, that if we fail to meet minimum compliance with SB 98, do we endanger the district of receiving the waiver that would be critical to us being able to meet our fiduciary responsibilities? Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Thank you. I think my internet's choppy tonight.
Yeah, I haven't seen the application, Member Pritchett, for the waiver yet and all the requirements in order for us to qualify for it. So I would not be able to answer that. I know that the application is supposed to come out pretty soon in the next couple of months. And I'm sure there's going to be information out a lot sooner than that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Pritchett. Do we have any other board member questions or comments? Okay, it looks like none. I do have a few questions and comments that I would like to make, Rose. First, Ms. Ramos, I appreciate your very detailed explanation of the reasons we are resulting in the surplus that we are seeing today, in particular, the inability to make expenditures that are core to student support in the course of a regular school year when our schools are opened. And I think that I appreciate that Board Member Garcia validated, based on her K-12 education policy work, that this is not an anomaly. This is being seen at K-12 districts across the state. K-12 districts across the state, as a result of that reduction in expenditure based on the fact that we are in a global pandemic, are finding themselves in a surplus. So I just preface that to say that is why I am so angry that in the face of this recognition that our district, consistent with other districts in the state, find ourselves with additional revenue that are one-time funds, is being used as a way to somehow push back the sense of urgency around the need to avoid going off the fiscal cliff and entering into receivership. How many times over the years have we heard that one of the great downfalls of Sac City Unified is we have used one-time funding to pay for ongoing expenses? I want to point out the mismatch between what we saw and what's being requested from David Fisher and what was explicitly stated by FCMAT's Mike Fine. On one hand, you have an entity saying we should be hiring new positions, that this surplus should be allowing us to bring additional teaching staff, nursing staff, counseling staff, all wonderful ideas that we would love to be able to invest in if we weren't in a budget-starved environment, with no recognition that we would not be able to sustain those positions because this is a one-time savings. On the other hand, we have Mike Fine of FCMAT telling us we should be probably pursuing additional layoffs. And I think Rose did a beautiful job of unpacking for us the reality that these are key positions both in teaching staff and in classified staff that we will need once we reopen our school. So how do we reconcile this dichotomy? I think what we have to be able to say is we have bought a couple months away from impending fiscal insolvency, but as I said a few months ago, we have a stay of execution, but we are still on death row. It is offensive to me that I am not hearing a sense of urgency from any of the parties. I appreciate the work of Dave Gordon and SCOE. I appreciate the work of Mike Fine and FCMAT. And yet, when you acknowledge that we have an unsustainable funding structure for benefits and salary, when you acknowledge that the only route to avoiding fiscal receivership is coming to a negotiated solution, and yet both parties are not willing to be grounded in the same recognition of the gravity of the budget situation, nothing moves. And so I have to ask, at what point do the multiple audits move from just recognizing the gravity of the fiscal circumstances to stepping up and being active participants and demanding the necessary changes? It will do a grave disservice to our students and to our community if we find ourselves in a place where, because we have bought a couple months of additional effort to be able to avoid insolvency, we push ourselves to the brink of the fiscal cliff and go over that cliff because we haven't been able to push forward the political will from all stakeholders, internal and external, to upend that dynamic. When I'm hearing from people in the field saying maybe it's so hopeless that we should just go to a place and accept that fiscal receivership is inevitable for Sac City, when we know that fiscal receivership for school districts that have had this happen across the state have not only harmed the futures of their families and their students, but they have deeply contributed to economic malaise for the cities in which the receiverships occur. And what we have seen is that it has taken a decade or more to recover. Mike Fine said if we find ourselves in a receivership, we will take out the largest state loan in the history of a school district. What does that mean? Decades of inequity. That means that we will see families, mass exodus of Sac City Unified for the families who can afford to go to private schools or who will choose to go to private charters, public charters. And we will find only the families that have no other options remaining in Sac City as the inequities grow and the bottom line becomes balancing the budget because local control is lost for a decade, perhaps longer. And so I hope that we walk away from tonight's presentation and not just saying, okay, we can explain the surplus based on the COVID context. And we have a couple of additional months before we find ourselves in impending insolvency. My question of Rose, of the superintendent, and of the board members is what point do we step up and say enough is enough? Our students will suffer if we cannot get the negotiated solutions we need to prevent this perfect crisis, if the state auditor's report did not make it clear for us, I don't know what will. The state auditor report unpacked the SCTA proposal and found that it would cost us more money, not save us money. We have a roadmap from the state auditor that if we followed could allow us to avoid going over that fiscal cliff, that could allow us to finally build a structure within Sac City that comes to a place of reinvesting in our students. And if we look as a board at easier options on the peripheral, if we continue to do what we feel is more comfortable than calling out the grave inequities that exist and the demands that are being made around creating changes to unsustainable structures that have been well documented for decades long, we are going to find ourselves in a place where we are failing our students and our community. And I just want to ask, Superintendent Aguilar, with that in mind, so we've bought a couple of additional months. We know from multiple independent sources what the issues are at hand. What are we doing? How many requests have we made to bargain? And then I also want to, as my second question, hear from Rose. Do we have any other path to the kinds of multi-year savings that would allow us to avoid a receivership if we cannot negotiate the healthcare changes necessary to be able to see that type of large funding that we will need to be able to sustain the district moving forward?
Thank you, President Ryan. And certainly I will say as superintendent that I've been here for almost 3.5 years. And in that time, I have seen several independent entities that are not affiliated to the school district, some of whom are led by individuals that I didn't have a relationship prior to my superintendency here, and some that I still don't have relationships with even to this day, for example, the state auditor. And in every one of those cases, these entities have come in, they've unpacked our budget structure, and they have called out exactly what needs to be done in order for us not to be in a place where we become insolvent at some point. The FICMAT report today said the same thing in the Sacramento Bee, as I understand, being quoted from Mr. Fine, that this is not a question of if, but a question of when. And so I would also ask that our community continue to create the demand of all parties to make sure that we address the actual structure of the budget, which is the issue, not whether we were able to achieve one-time savings because of this unprecedented pandemic. And as one of our community members, as I heard public comments on this agenda item, put it very simply, all we're doing is increasing the reserves, but we are drawing them down, and at some point there won't be enough reserves because these are not ongoing savings. And we have talked about analogy after analogy and metaphor after metaphor. We can talk about our own households, and when we're spending more than what we're bringing in, it doesn't matter if one month we happen to have more savings than what we would be able to rely on in future months. At some point, those savings are going to be drawn down and you won't have any more savings. I'm at a loss, board members, for how to explain this either in a intellectually intriguing way or in a very simple way, because after the number of independent entities that have come into the district, the fact that we are still faced with narratives and arguments that this is not what we are facing as a challenge that is coming to this community. Again, I don't know how to respond to that. I have heard, and we will come back, board members, with the discussion, and certainly we will look to SCOE and other parties that can maybe help us figure out how, after making over $50 million in ongoing cuts over the past couple of years, we could possibly continue to make even deeper cuts in ongoing expenses to address the fiscal challenge and the actual structural deficit that we face. It will not be an easy task. Nobody has come to us and said, other than the state auditor, which you mentioned, President Ryan, but those are largely based on negotiations. We will come back, and I will ask our board and others to bring some ideas for how you do that without a negotiated solution.
Well,
Finally,
Superintendent, no, go ahead.
Finally,
Go ahead and
finally,
finish.
to answer your question, President Ryan, I did send a communication to our labor partner asking that we resume negotiations on a successor contract. And I will certainly keep you posted on whether our teams will be getting together over the next few days.
So, my final comment in response to that, Superintendent, is that we have more than 80 requests to meet and bargain the successor contract. That was being held up on the PERB negotiations and final ruling related to the healthcare benefits provision that was at issue in the 2017 contract. That has since been settled. So we have nothing else pertaining to the 2017 contract that should be preventing us from moving forward and doubling down on this effort. And I would say, with all due respect, Superintendent, to you, to Superintendent Gordon, to Mike Fine, I think it is very easy to say collaborate. It is very easy to say come to a negotiated solution. What I'm looking for, and what I hope you will also demand as we see them as allies and fiscal advisors who should have a depth of expertise beyond just asking us to come together to put forth what they believe options are in a situation that is untenable to develop the types of savings we would need if we don't tackle the root of the problem, the heart of the problem, which is the healthcare benefit savings.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay. With that, this item is an action item. Do we have a motion to approve this report and a second?
So moved.
Oh, second.
And this is student preferential vote.
Aye.
All those in favor?
The roll call vote.
Oh, thank you.
Member Ryan,
Aye.
Member Pritchett, Member Pritchett,
Aye.
Member Minnick,
Aye.
Member Morowski,
Aye.
Member Garcia,
Aye.
Member Vang,
Yes.
Member Wu.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item 10.0, the consent agenda.
Move the consent.
Do we have a second? Student preferential vote.
Yes on all open session items.
Thank you. This is not a roll call vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries.
This is a roll call vote.
It wasn't listed as, thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. Thank you, Superintendent Aguilar.
Member Ryan,
Aye.
Member Pritchett,
Aye.
Member Minnick,
Aye.
Member Morowski,
Aye.
Member Garcia,
Aye.
Member Vang,
Yes.
Member Wu.
Aye.
The motion carries. Item 11.0, business and financial aid, financial information reports. Item 11.1, receive reports. Do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, we do. We have one public comment. And this is from a joint public comment on behalf of the Coalition for Students with Disabilities by Angie Sutherland, Angel Garcia, Sarah Williams Kingsley, and Renee Webster Hawkins. Thank you for including the enrollment and attendance reports for April and May 2020. Last spring, during the distance learning updates to the board, staff provided information about how it was tracking student attendance and engagement and how it defined zero engagement. A significantly disproportionate number of those zero engagement students were students with disabilities. Other LCFF student groups were also absent or unreachable. The district's return to learning plan indicates that attendance will be monitored through multiple measures this fall to improve each school's ability to keep at-risk students engaged and connected. The Coalition for Students with Disabilities asks that you amend the monthly attendance report to include data collected through the multiple measures. And we further request that the data is disaggregated to reflect the attendance and engagement of students in the LCFF student groups plus students with disabilities. The community deserves to know that it can expect these monthly reports so that the district's efforts to keep students engaged and learning during the pandemic are transparent. And that concludes our board comment for tonight.
Thank you. Item 12.0, future board meeting dates and locations. We're going to be adjourning back to closed session, but our next board meeting will be held on October 1st, also a virtual board meeting. And I do want to, just before we close tonight's board meeting, recognize the passing of a beloved staff member who had been a part of our Sac City community for more than 20 years. I heard from so many of her colleagues on the ground that said her spirit, her compassion, her total dedication to the work was exemplary. This employee, Darren Williams, was a twin, and I had a chance to talk with her sister, who shared that the one thing that's giving her comfort right now through this extraordinary difficult time is that her sister loved each and every day of the work she did to serve our students. And so with that, I just want to say a couple things about her, and then we'll adjourn in her memory. Darren Williams was a nutritious services department staff member for 25 years. She worked at Burbank. She worked at Father Keith B. Kenny and Kit Carson. She was so proud of the ability to bring hot food that she would deliver to elementary schools and present children with a smile. She was a joy to everyone that she came in contact with, including motivating and inspiring the staff around her, filling them with laughter, and even through the COVID crisis, making them believe that each and every day was an opportunity to serve our kids. There are no words. We will miss Darren tremendously, and we want to just offer our condolences to her family, to all of her friends in the Sac City community, and also appreciate the love and compassion that she put into 25 years of service for the district. And with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn in Darren's memory.
Motion.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And we'll adjourn back to closed session. Thank you.